Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kushina takes Naruto to Whirlpool and train him there. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A few miles away from Konoha, also known as the Leaf Village, a large army of samurais could be seen heading towards the village, walking on the main road without a worry in the world. Through the forest, jumping from tree to tree, was a large number of ninjas of Uzushio, armed to the teeth for a battle. They all bore the crest of the Whirlpool Nation and served the founding ninja clan of both the nation and the village that resided within it, the Uzumaki clan. They were a strong nation, equal to that of the 5 great countries and their villages. The clan were the cousins of the Hyuga clan, Senju clan and Uchiha clan, since being founded by the first Uzumaki, Murugan, the son of Hamura Otsutsuki, the brother of the Rikudo Sannin. The samurai wore specially designed armor with Uzumaki seals, protecting them from almost all ninjutsu. The ninja with them were a special division of the Uzushio's Anbu, called the Kurokashi. In the center of the army was a carriage that carried none other than the Whirlpool daimyo Toshio Uzumaki and the former Nidaime Uzukage. He was a man in his early to mid-60s and thanks to his clan's longevity looked younger than he really was. He had a dark red beard that went down to his neck and gray/red hair that went down his neck and covered his ears and a little bit of his forehead and dark blue eyes. Walking alongside the carriage was a tall man, who was perhaps in his late 20s. He wore a long black coat that had long sleeves with red shoulder pads and arm bracers over it, and had a zanbato that was about 150 centimeters long strapped to his back. His spiky red hair went down to the center of his back and his blue eyes were very intimidating. He was the oldest son of Toshio Uzumaki, Hysen Uzumaki, also known as the Sorigami, Sky God, and the Yandaime Uzukage of Uzushio, as well as the current head of the Uzumaki clan. The sword he wielded, that had a smooth black handle with yellow lines going over it as an X, was called the Koken, Yagarasu, Black Sword, Night Raven, one of the many tools forged by Murugan. Both men had a look of absolute anger on their faces. Then Toshio turned to look at his son. Hysen, take some of our men and go ahead of the army, informed the guards of our arrival. Hysen nodded and went ahead, with several ninjas following in pursuit. Toshio looked behind him at another carriage that was being carried as well. In there was a young woman, who appeared to be in her earlier 30s or so. She had long red hair that went down to her knees, deep blue eyes and smooth skin. She wore a blue kimono that had dark blue lines across it that looked like waves. The woman's eyes were hardened, set directly on Konoha with only one thought in mind, Naruto. Back in Konoha, the village remained unaware of the approaching force that was heading towards them. It had been 3 years since the Kyuubi's attack and the death of Minato Namikaze, the Yandaime Hokage, who gave his life to seal the demon into his newborn son Naruto. It had also been 3 years when Kushina Uzumaki, Minato's wife and Naruto's mother, died as well. Naruto Hiruzen, reinstated Sandaime Hokage, thought to himself as he looked out the window of his office, thinking that he should have been the one to have done the sealing. When word got out that Naruto was the new Jinchuriki, there were immediate calls for his death by many. And from some, the more militaristic kind, wanted to use him as a weapon. Hiruzen sighed as he wondered what Minato would be thinking now, how his son, who should be treated like a hero, was instead treated like a plague. True, he himself had tried his best to take care of Naruto in honor of his successor, since he knew that Naruto was not the Kyuubi. But with his duties as Hokage, it was not so easy a task, especially when trying to keep the civilian council, Fugaku Uchiha, and the elders away from Naruto. Suddenly a cat mask wearing Anbu appeared before Hiruzen's desk, bringing him out of his thoughts. The Anbu was a woman if the long purple hair gave any indication. Hokage-sama, news from the northern guards, the Anbu reported. Getting serious, Hiruzen turned around with a hard look on his face. What has happened? He said with the voice of a hardened veteran. A small group, about 3 squads, of Yuza Anbu have appeared at the gate. They're being led by the Uzukage Hysen Uzumaki and demand an audience with you, the cat Anbu replied. Hiruzen paled at the name. He had met Hysen a long time ago, during the Third Shinobi World War, when Konoha and Uzushio were doing a joint operation against a large force of Iwanins that were threatening to attack the Fire Country from the rear. A risky strategy, but an unexpected one. It would have indeed caught Konoha off guard. However, when everyone was getting ready for a harsh battle, it was Hysen who took the Iwa force all on his own. Hysen was a rarity, having been born with 3 natural chakra natures, water, wind and lightning in that order, but he had a high control with water release. He was also probably the second person in history who could control the water molecules in the air, second only to Tobirama Senju, the Nidaime Hokage. But his prowess with all 3 elements were high, so much that he could even control the weather, thus earning him the name Sorigami, Sky God. He took the position of Uzukage before Minato took the Hokage seat, and he proved his skills when he managed to defeat the Yellow Flash in a friendly spar, which Hiruzen bared witness to. Another concern was why were they coming here now? The Whirlpool country had cut all ties with Konoha since Kushina's death 3 years ago. Perhaps they were finally coming for Naruto, since with Hysen as Yuzukage and Kushina dead, Naruto would be next in line for the throne as the Whirlpool daimyo. However, that would bring up complications in Konoha. Danzo and his former teammates would want Naruto to remain in Konoha, because of the Kyuubi, and in order to gain both the civilian and shinobi support they would reveal Naruto's father. And with how loved Minato was, Hiruzen had a good idea that the people of Konoha would fight for the Yandame's son. But right now the old Hokage had to deal with the current situation. Turning back to the Anbu, he said, "Are there any Anbu at the gate with them?" The cat Anbu nodded. "Hi, Hokage-sama, Tenzo is there right now, trying to calm the guards and the Yuzanines down." Hiruzen nodded. Tenzo, despite not really knowing anyone from Whirlpool, was a man who could keep them calm until the Hokage had more time to assess the situation. "Very well, I want you, Tenzo, and a squad of ANBU to escort them here ASAP. Understood?" The ANBU nodded and disappeared, leaving Hiruzen to his thoughts about the current situation. Finally, after a few minutes to think, he said to no one, "Dog." Soon another ANBU, a male with silver hair and wearing a dog mask, appeared. The dog mask he wore hid his face, but you could tell he was a serious ninja. "Hi, Hokage-sama?" Without stopping, Hiruzen said, "I want you to find Naruto Uzumaki and bring him to my clan compound for the time being. Is that understood?" "Hi, Hokage-sama," Dog said before disappearing as well. Hiruzen sighed as he leaned in his chair. "I'm getting too old for this crap." With Dog, aka Kakashi Hatake. After leaving the Hokage mansion, Kakashi dashed through the roofs of Konoha, searching for the blonde Jinchuriki. His first destination would be to head towards the orphanage that the boy stayed at, but he knew that the matron of the place would frequently throw Naruto out into the streets, so chances of him being there were slim. Nonetheless, Itachi made a shadow clone to check the orphanage while he continued his search throughout the village. The best way, Kakashi figured, was to look for any large crowds of people. Usually Naruto's presence caused people to become angry since they mistook him as the Kyuubi in human form, thus formed large mobs to chase him. So Kakashi spent the last few minutes searching for any signs of suspicious activities when he suddenly saw several blurs passing by him, so fast that not even his implanted Sharingan could keep up with their movements. Still, he managed to figure out what direction they were heading towards and so followed them. After a minute or so, Kakashi lost sight of them and suddenly heard blades hitting flesh, followed up by the screams of people, which then turned to silence. He stopped his running to go and investigate when he once again saw the blurs leaving from the alleyway, heading straight towards the mansion. This time his Sharingan noticed that 2 of the blurs were carrying something or someone. They were both kids, no more than 3. One was a boy with blonde spiky hair with tan skin. The other was a girl with pale milky skin and blue hair shaped into a Heim style. Kakashi soon recognized who they were. Shit, he thought to himself as he made off after them. Hokage Mansion, Council Room. It didn't take that long for Hiruzen to send out word to the council, both shinobi, civilian and elders, to arrive for an emergency meeting, stating that lateness was not an option. The Hokage usually didn't mind if people weren't on time as long as they didn't dilly-dally. But if the Hokage said he had no time for lateness or tardiness, then everyone in the council knew it was serious, hence why they arrived to the council room quickly. Many of them were shocked to see the daimyo of Whirlpool along with his son and a woman whose face was covered by a veil. Several Yuzu and Bu of its Kurokishi division had their arms behind their backs while guarding the daimyo and his son. Like all ANBU in any village, these ninjas wore masks to cover their faces, thus hiding their identity. However, these ANBU wore plain black masks with kanji symbols on them in red. Along with that, they wore light black chest armor, metal guards and leg guards. Underneath all that was dark blue clothing, including a hood and black gloves. Strapped to their backs were swords, mostly ninjato. Also strapped around their left sleeve was a symbol of Yuzushi Ogakure. And finally around their necks was a necklace with a black round circle with silver lines forming a swirl, a symbol of Yuzushio's founding clan, the Uzumaki clan. The Kurokishi division of Yuzushio ANBU specialized in seals for combat, and were feared greatly by many, especially those who have seen them fight with said seals either on their bodies or weapons. The way they stood behind the 3 people silently was unnerving even for the clan heads. But if you asked why the fire daimyo allowed his counterpart to bring such a large force with him into his country until they saw the signed paper from the fire daimyo, granting Tashi to enter his lands for whatever reasons he had. Deciding to cut the tension that was growing in the air, Hiruzen made a noise with his throat to get everyone's attention. "Now before we start this meeting, I would like to welcome Tashi-sama, Hysen-sama and..." Hiruzen gestured to the woman sitting beside the daimyo. Tashi Uzumaki sent a silent glare towards the old Hokage, a glare capable of making the god of shinobi flinch a little. "This woman is the reason why we're here. That along with the fact we were apparently lied to about a certain event that happened 3 years ago. This made everyone look at each other, trying to figure out what happened 3 years ago. The only thing that came to mind was when the Kyuubi attacked, causing many deaths such as the Yondaime Hokage. Hiruzen was starting to wonder if they really did find out about Naruto. He along with the clan heads and other top jonins could practically sense the malice coming off the daimyo, his son and the mysterious woman. I'm afraid I do not know what you're talking about. The moment he finished that sentence 5 more Yuza and Bu appeared on the other side of the council table, kneeling before their kage and daimyo. The one at the front, a male by his voice, with the kanji of ghost said, Tashiya-sama, Yuzukage-sama, Uzumaki-sama, we found him. With the last part the ANBU on his left stepped forward, revealing that he had something or someone in his arms and that someone was Naruto-kun. The veiled woman shouted as she dashed forward, her mask falling off as she ran towards said blonde, who was currently unconscious, allowing everyone to see her fair skin, blue eyes and long red hair. The face made everyone who recognized a gasp, for it was none other than Kushina Uzumaki, wife of Minato Namikaze, daughter of Tashi Uzumaki and to a few who knew, the mother of Naruto Uzumaki. A few of the clan heads performed a seal, muttering, Kai to try and see if it was a genjutsu, which it wasn't. However, the woman was blind to the rest of the world as she cradled her 3-year-old son close to her, crying with tears of joy of finally being reunited with him. Hiruzen was the first to regain his bearings when Dog appeared beside him. Forgive me Hokage-sama, but I wasn't able to move fast enough, he said before eyes widening behind his mask at the sight of Kushina, his sensei's wife, alive and well. Noticing the shock on the ANBU's face, Hiruzen made a hand gesture, a sign for him to leave and that it was okay. Once Dog was gone, Hiruzen turned towards the daimyo, with a suspicious glare on his ancient face. Tashiya-sama, is there a reason why your daughter, who was reported to have been dead after the attack of the Kyuubi, is here right now? The only answer he got back was glares from the Uzumaki family, along with their ANBU combined with a combination of killing intent that made many of the civilians pass out, a lot of the clan heads to shiver, and the ANBU who were hiding in the council room appeared, their lack of breathing making it hard for them to stay concealed. Naruto, who was still being held by his mother, began to whimper lightly at so much killing intent and subconsciously buried his head deeper into Kushina's chest. Noticing this, Kushina stopped glaring at the Hokage along with the others. She then realized that her son's face was covered in bruises with some healing, and his clothing had holes in them. Standing up straight and imposing, she said, Hiruzen, I'm taking my son to the hospital so his wounds can be treated. I'm sure my father and brother can fill you in with the details. After that we are taking him home, his true home. She said that we are with such strength that it left no room for doubt that she would use force to take her son out of the village. Hiruzen could only nod, not wanting to do anything that might invoke the wrath of the Whirlpool and the Fire Daimyo. But before Kushina could leave with some ANBU guards, the one designated ghost turned towards Hayashi. Hayashi Hyuga, I presume? Said man nodded. We feel like you should know that along with Naruto-sama, who was being beaten by a mob, that we dealt with a cold shiver went up all of the Konoha people's spines. We also discovered that a girl, that we have learned is your daughter Hinata Hyuga, was also smacked to the side, earning a concussion, when she tried to help Naruto-sama. What? Hayashi roared in anger. Despite his strict and emotionless outer appearance, Hayashi cared deeply for his wife and daughters, and the mere thought that one of them was hurt so badly angered him, especially after the loss of his brother a few months ago due to an incident when Kyumo tried to kidnap Hinata, thus causing Hizashi's death and his son, Niji, to hate the main branch. He looked at the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I ask permission to inform my wife of what has happened to Hinata. Hiruzen nodded and everyone watched as Hayashi left the council room, soon followed by his 2 Hyuga bodyguards. Then Kushina, along with half of the Yuza ANBU, carrying a still asleep Naruto, left soon after, leaving Tashiya and Hyson to deal with the council, not that they mind however. Now Tashiya said as he sat back down, followed by his son. As Hiruzen asked, you're all probably wondering how my daughter is still alive. The clan heads nodded. I will tell you to the best of my abilities since Kushina is the only one to recall what happened. She said that while Minato had taken their son, Naruto, to use to seal Kyuubi during its rampage. However, a few hours later, a doctor, whose name she didn't know, came in with her son's corpse. There were a few gasps here and there, and the Hokage's eyes widened. Her grief of losing both her son and husband in one night, combined with the emotional and physical drain she went through during birth, put her into a state of depression that she left the village without a second thought. But how can this be? When I arrived to the sealing area at least an hour after the sealing was done, I found the body of both Minato and Kushina there along with Naruto, who was just infant. Tashiya glared at the Hokage. Well, then it is clear that someone wanted Kushina out of the way so Naruto could remain in the village. He said as he glared at Danzo, with only his son and the Hokage catching the sudden glance. Anyway, it matter not, we have come here for Naruto, and once he has recovered we shall be heading back towards Whirlpool, no discussions. This time Danzo stood up, an annoyed look on his face. I'm afraid that isn't possible, we cannot allow you to take young Naruto. Having heard enough of this conversation over the demon brat, one civilian council member spoke up. Excuse me, but why would we want to have the child here anyway? He clearly isn't liked here, so why keep him? He said in a manner that hid his disgust of the child for nothing more than holding the QB. Danzo smirked, now playing his trump card. As I'm sure you all have noticed, Naruto is the son of both Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, thus making him the son of a Hokage. All the civilians rose up and roared in denial. The clan heads just sighed, knowing this was to come, since they already knew that Minato and Kushina were married. Enough! Hyson yelled, nearly shaking the room and causing all talking to cease. It matters not if he is the son of one of your Hokages. He is an Uzumaki and the rightful heir to the throne of the Whirlpool nation, seeing how Kushina Nichin will take the throne after my father, and thus Naruto will follow after, since I have taken the position of Uzukage and thus cannot become daimyo. Furthermore, his mother, Kushina Uzumaki, is now his rightful guardian and thus is allowed to take him out of this village unless you wish to bring forth the wrath of both the Whirlpool nation and Uzushiyogakure. That made everyone think carefully of their next words. True, they were known as one of the greatest shinobi village, but that was because their village was founded by Hashirama Senju, the strongest man of his time and perhaps even now. But the creation of the village was thanks to the Uzumaki clan, who helped the Fire Country fund the creation of Konoha. Furthermore, in reality, Uzushio had much more military power due to the Uzumaki clan's powers and seals, along with them being of descendants of the Rakuta Sennin. And backing them up were other powerful clans that were part of the village. Danzo was about to make a remark about the Fire Daimyo, but Tashu tossed Hiruzen a scroll, which had said Daimyo's signature on it. I've already discussed with my good old friend the Fire Daimyo. He was appalled that a member of our clan was being treated so badly and unjust for 3 years and that we were lied to about his survival. He has given us permission to move our forces through his lands, and we will do so if you refuse to give us Naruto-kun. That pretty much stopped any attempts of changing their minds at this point. Even Danzo knew that it would be foolish to go up both the forces of Whirlpool and their own Fire Daimyo, despite his anger of losing the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Once Tasha saw no one else was going to speak, he continued. In my mind, this village deserves to rot for the betrayal that it has done to my family. However, that would be unfair to my daughter who, despite being lied to, still has many dear friends in this village for who she cares for. So for hers and Minato-kun's sake, I am willing to reopen trading with both Konoha and the Fire Country under some circumstances. Everyone let out air that they didn't even know that they were holding. There was still hope for them after all. Yes, I think that would be nice. Though I admit that we had no idea that Kushina-chan was even alive, which I assure you the people responsible will be looked for, I am glad that Konoha and Uzushio can work out a deal and reconnect our lost bonds. That, and I will be glad that Naruto-kun has family to take care of him to atone for my failure of taking care of him. I assume that you wish to discuss opening trade later? Hiruzen asked. Tashio and Hyson nodded. Yes, I would like to go and check on my daughter and my grandson at the hospital, just to make sure they got there okay. Good day. And with that, the Whirlpool Daimyo, the Uzukage and the ANBU all walked out of the council room, making the atmosphere in there less tense than it was at the beginning. Konoha's hospital. At first, Kushina used speed that would make onlookers believe she was using her husband's Hiration, and you would too if you were a mother who was just reunited with her 3-year-old son who was wounded all over his body and barely had any nutrition in him. Also, did I forget to mention that a mother is not the best person to anger, especially if she's an Uzumaki and especially if you anger her by insulting her child? Because that's what happened when Kushina arrived to the hospital. The receptionist, upon recognizing Naruto, snapped at her, saying that they do not treat demons. It took almost all of Kushina's escorts to restrain the Whirlpool princess from brutally mutilating the foolish woman, while Ghost convinced her in a more calmer, yet intimidating, way of getting them a room, along with the fact that the receptionist would be facing the wrath of the Whirlpool nation for yelling at its princess and her son. So now, after several and may I see painful arguments between Kushina and some of the hospital staff, which left the latter in need of medical attention themselves, we find ourselves in one of the hospital rooms with Kushina Uzumaki sitting beside her sleeping son. The Kurokashi were outside the room, guarding the door, the window and the rooftop in order to make sure that nothing could reach the princess or her son. In the room next to them, Hinata Hyuga was resting in, recovering from her injuries she sustained from trying to help Naruto. 2 Hyuga guards were covering the door along with Inyuza Anbu. Kushina had insisted that she at least make sure that the girl that helped her son was okay, and would also later like to meet with Hayashi. However, right now Kushina's thoughts were on her son, who was still asleep, letting out soft, quiet sounds as he rested. Now that she got a better look at him, she could tell that Naruto was an exact replica of his father, Minato Namikaze. From the tan skin to the blue eyes and the spiky blonde hair, Naruto was like a mini version of Kushina's late husband, minus the whiskers of course. It just made Kushina's heart break even more that she had left her son, her little baby boy, alone here in Konoha for 3 years, while she didn't even bother to confront the Hokage all those years ago if her son was really dead. Moving slowly and gently, she rubbed her son's cheek, hoping to get rid of the dry tears that Naruto had formed when he was being beaten. However, this simple interaction caused Naruto to stir, his eyelids tightening at the contact of something rubbing against his skin. Slowly Naruto opened his eyes, and the first thing that came into sight was a beautiful older woman with blue eyes, fair skin and long red hair. But her eyes looked sad as she looked at him, like she was in some kind of pain, not physical pain but emotional pain. Suddenly Naruto jerked back in fear, the memory of the mob coming back to him now, as he was now scared that this woman meant to harm him. This just seemed to make the beautiful redhead more concerned as Naruto edged away from her, his eyes wide with panic in them. Kushina could see the fear in her son's eyes, but it was natural for him to be worried of where he is after just waking up from a terrible attack. So slowly Kushina leaned towards her son, speaking in a soft voice. "It's okay, Naruto-kun. I'm not going to hurt you," she said kindly as she tried to hug the scared child. Her voice was very soothing, Naruto noticed as he listened, and the kindness in it almost made him believe her. But he had been subjugated to much cruelty that he was unsure if he could trust this woman. So he weakly said, "Why, you're not going to hurt me?" he squeaked. Kushina shook her head slowly, her arms still out towards her son. "Never, I would never ever hurt you, Naruto-kun. You mean everything to me, my Soichi." Naruto's heart stopped at the last word. This woman, this stranger, had just called him her son. He thought he had misheard her, but something was telling him that she said what he heard her said. "And mommy?" he said softly, his voice full of fear and hope. Kushina could only nod, a smile on her face and tears of joy running down on her cheeks when Naruto finally embraced her, burying his face into her chest, letting out his own sobs of joy as Kushina wrapped her arms around his tiny form. For a moment the room was quiet with the exception of the mother and son's sobbing of finally being reunited after so long. As they hugged, Kushina kept whispering, "I'm sorry, Soichi. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm so sorry," she said between sobs. The honesty and regret in her voice made Naruto truly believe that she never meant to leave him, and that just made him cry louder as he tightened his grip on her kimono. The reunion lasts for a few more minutes, both people in complete happiness that not a single author could describe in a lifetime. Once both had calmed down, Naruto, while still buried in his mother's hug, looked up at Kushina shyly. Are you really here to stay?" he asked in a tiny voice. Kushina could only nod, a soft smile on her face as she kissed her son's head. Yes, I'm here now and I won't ever leave you. I'm going to take you home with me so you can meet the rest of your family. Won't that be nice?" Naruto nodded slowly, half listening to his mother, and half being content of being in her warm embrace. A family, for as long he could remember he always wanted a family, people that would always be with him and loved him. And now he had a mom who loved her so much that it hurt. He was in complete and utter bliss. They had no idea how long they stayed like that until they heard the door opening. Stepping inside were Tashio and Hyson. The daimyo smiled at the sight of mother and son reuniting and felt a little bad about ruining their moment. But he still spoke. "I see that you're awake, Naruto-kun," Tashio said softly as he and Hyson walked towards them. Naruto, feeling shy, digged deeper into his mother, not knowing who these two were. Noticing Naruto's wariness, Kushina smiled softly at her son. Soichi gaining her son's attention. "These are your Gigi and uncle. Don't you want to say hi?" Naruto looked up at his mother for a moment, and then back at the two men. He looked at Tashio, who was the closest. "Gigi?" he whispered. Tashio nodded with a soft smile on his face. "Indeed, I am Naruto-kun. My name is Tashio Uzumaki, and it's nice to see you." Then he had to stop what he was going to say next when Naruto got out of his mom's grip and nearly tackled Tashio with a hug. Sniffling a little into his kimono, Naruto murmured, "Tashio Gigi," as he tightened his grip on his grandfather's kimono while Tashio just smiled softly and rubbed his grandson's back. Hyson rustled his nephew's spiky hair affectionately. Naruto smiled at the fact that he was now surrounded by family when he spotted something coming out of the ground, causing the Naruto to yelp in shock. After hearing his cry, the three adults spun around. In front of them was a regular-sized man wearing a black cloak with a hood covering his face, but you could tell he had green skin. The man took off his hood, revealing his red eyes, and soon got to his knees before the family. "Tashio-sama, forgive my intrusion, but I bring news about the council and Konoha," the man said with a monotone voice. Tashiya nodded before looking back at Naruto, who was being calmed down by his mother. You have nothing to fear, Naruto-kun. This man is a long-time friend of our clan. His name is Yujin, and he was the one who informed us about your survival, he said with a smile. It's true, Yujin had served the Uzumaki clan since the clan's founding. The reason was because the Rikudo Sennin, Zayden, gave him life. However, after his creator's passing, Yujin fell under the command of Rikishi Uzumaki, serving the clan for generations. And thanks to his molecular manipulation, Yujin has served well as a spy, assassin and scout for the clan, the village and the nation. Thanks to his control over molecules, he could switch his organs with new materials so that they wouldn't decay or cease working. Naruto looked at his grandfather, then at Yujin and finally at his mother, who gave him a reassuring nod. Naruto turned back at Yujin and waved his hand shyly. In response, Yujin did a bow towards the young Uzumaki. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Naruto-sama. But back to the subject at hand, I bring news of what I heard the Konoha Council spoke of as well as other information that I've discovered. Tashiya nodded, and once Kushina had managed to reassure Naruto that she would be right outside the room, did the three older Uzumaki, and Yujin left to discuss what Yujin had found out. Once they were outside and all four of them were out of listening length, Yujin began reporting what he had discovered. I shall first begin with the conditions that Tashiya-sama gave to the council, Yujin said as he pulled out a scroll. They agreed to fire the matron of the orphanage that Naruto-sama was at, as well as bring her before Kushina-sama for interrogation. He shuddered at the last part, almost feeling sorry for the matron who was going to receive Kushina's wrath. Then he continued, the council has agreed to remove your clan symbols from their flak jackets to show that they failed to keep the bonds between Konoha and Yazushio due to their abuse to Naruto-sama. And speaking of clan, after getting the report that Tsunade-sama and her assistant Shizen-san have moved to the Whirlpool capital, all belongings including money of the Senju clan shall be taken from the Hokage vault, and the Senju compound shall be taken back to Whirlpool with us. It's true, Tsunade, the only known remaining Senju as well as the granddaughter of the Shodaime Hokage, Hashirama Senju, had left Konoha a long time ago after the death of her younger brother and lover, taking her lover's niece with her. 3 years ago, Tsunade was given a letter from Tashiya that she was welcome to stay with them in Whirlpool since she was family. This helped Tsunade out of her depression and alcoholic state as she realized that she still had family out there. Since then she has been serving as either the personal medic of Tashiya's family or running the hospital at Yazushio, having finally created her idea for a medic NIN program. Though since she was still licensed as a Konoha shinobi she couldn't become an official Yuzunin. Currently she, along with Tashiya's wife, Amaya Uzumaki, mother of Hysen and Kushina Uzumaki and grandmother of Naruto and Karen Uzumaki, the latter being Hysen's daughter, A/N. Bet you didn't see that coming. Swanda's assistant Shizen were staying at the Fire Daimyo's palace. The reason is despite feeling ill for some time, Amaya was relentless in her desire to come to the Fire Nation to see her grandson and if she had to, raze Konoha to the ground. True, a mother's wrath is one to be feared, but a grandmother's wrath is even greater, especially if they learn the abuse that their grandchild had. What about the seals around the walls? Have they agreed to let us take them down since they were set up by our clan? Hysen asked. That's where they were less than cooperative to agree, Yujin said. Since the seals serve as a defense against invaders, they would rather have an alternative agreement than just removing the seals. Tashiya rubbed his chin as he turned towards his children. I suppose we could agree to remake the seals into a detection barrier rather than a repelling barrier, Tashiya said. Kushina nodded in agreement, while Hysen just shrugged his shoulders. As long as we show what dicks these people were, I don't really care. Suddenly Yuza and Bu appeared before all four of them. Forgive my interruption, but Naruto-sama is asking to see you, Kushina-sama. He's feeling worried that you might have forgotten about him. Kushina nodded and began heading back towards the room her son was staying in. Before she went in, she turned around to Yujin and asked, were you able to find the people that I requested for? Yujin nodded. Yes, Kushina-sama, I have located Mikoto Uchiha, Tuchi and Aya Michiraku, your other teammate Hitomi Hyuga, your friend Mabuki Haruno, and your students Yugao Yuzuki, Anko Mitarashi and Kurinai Yuhi. Everyone besides Yugao and most likely Mikoto and Hitomi through their husbands will have known of your arrival. If you wish, I shall invite them over for them to see you. Kushina nodded. Thank you. I think I'll meet with them tomorrow, but if they want to see me now, then they can. And with that she went back inside the room where she saw her son hiding underneath the bed sheets, only the top of his head visible. His eyes were scanning the whole entire room nervously, but when they landed on Kushina they seemed to calm down. Mommy? Naruto asked in a quiet voice. Kushina nodded with a soft smile before making her way over to her son's side. Did you miss me, Soichi? She asked in a soft tone. Naruto nodded before putting his hands, which Kushina took as she pulled Naruto into an embrace. I just wanted to spend more time with you, Mommy. Naruto said as he snuggled into Kushina's chest before closing his eyes, tired after today's events. Kushina didn't say anything, just rubbed her son's back gently while the room remained in silent bliss. A week later. The week had gone by and the people of Konoha could only say that it was interesting. After reassuring her son for perhaps the 1000th time that he would be coming home with her, Kushina set out to punish those responsible for her son's terrible life. She first started with the matron of the orphanage that Naruto had stayed in. The damage that was done to the older woman were so bad that it was most likely that her body would never be able to function properly again. Several men, citizens and shinobi, who had abused Naruto would not only be able to sit properly for months but most likely couldn't even be considered men anymore due to the loss of their package. Then came the store owners who either didn't sell Naruto anything or overcharged him for rotten food. Their stores were burned down and they were left on the ground brutally beaten that during the whole ride to the hospital they were crying out in pain. Naturally many people, mostly civilians and a few of the ignorant shinobi, had demanded that something be done about these attacks. But there was nothing that the Hokage could do for several reasons. The first was that Kushina was in her full right to punish these people due to the torment that her son had been given. The second was that she was royalty and arresting the princess of the Whirlpool nation could have several repercussions, and the last part was that no one had the courage to stand up to an angry mother, especially an angry Uzumaki mother. Speaking of which, an announcement was made the day after Tashio and his family arrived about Naruto's true status. This had multiple reactions from the populace of Konoha. One was that many felt ashamed and stupid for not only breaking their yandame's dying wish but not noticing the resemblance between father and son. There was a small bunch that tried to deny that the demon boy was the son of their greatest hero and the princess of the Whirlpool nation, but this group decreased drastically after some persuasion from Kushina. Kushina wasn't violent to everyone that she met. In fact, she was quite literally tackled by her good friends Mikoto, Hitomi, Mabuki and then her 3 students. Kushina had been very surprised that her 3 kunoichi students had progressed so far in these past 3 years. Enko and Kurenai were both chunin, with the former coming close to Tokubetsu Jonin and working in the torture and interrogation department, while Kurenai was going to become an academy instructor and was the personal caretaker of Hinata Hyuga. Yugao had already become Jonin and was now an ANBU working under Hiruzen. She was also currently dating Hate Gecko, something that Kushina had seen coming since she would always see Yugao doing sweet things like trying to cure his cough. Current time, Hokage's office. Currently Tashio and his son Hyson were working out the last bit of the new treaty with Hiruzen. Of course before that the 2 Uzumaki had a good laugh when they mentioned about using shadow clones for paperwork. Hiruzen was repeatedly slamming his face on his desk for not realizing that it seems that the third man to be called the god of shinobi had never been able to find a way to defeat Hokage's greatest enemy. Of course once that was done they could finally finalize the treaty by signing it. When suddenly there was a huge explosion from the northern gate. The 3 people immediately stood up just as a Konoha and Yuzushio ANBU appeared. Hokage-sama. Tashio-sama. Hyson-sama. What happened? Hiruzen asked his ANBU. A woman arrived at the gate and without a word to the gate guards and then literally knocked down the steel gates. She is currently going on a rampage within Konoha. Anyone that tries to stop her is brutally knocked to the side. But we managed to spot Tsunade-sama and Shizen-sen accompanying her. The moment he finished that sentence, Tashio let out a loud, exasperated sigh while Hyson was rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Even the Yuzushio ANBU let out a nervous chuckle. Realizing that all eyes were on them, Tashio sighed again and said, "It seems that Amaya-chan lost patience and decided to come to Konoha herself." With that sentence Hiruzen paled considerably. He was well aware of the Uzumaki infamous anger, and Amaya Uzumaki probably was the most notable member of her clan that possessed it. When she went on one of her rampage there are a few to almost no one who can stop her. It was at this moment that he was glad that he now learned the secret to defeating paperwork, because he was sure that whatever damage that Tashio's wife was about to cause would come back and hit him hard. "Tashio-sama, since this is your wife, could you?" The Hokage hadn't to complete that sentence because Tashio, Hyson and the Yuzushio ANBU had already departed in a wind shunshin. Konoha Hospital. Guess mom got tired of waiting. Kushina thought when she heard the explosion and people yelling. However, her focus went back towards her son, who was conversing with a Hyuga around the same age who was desperately trying to remain awake. Hinata was still in her hospital bed since her injuries were severe and she did not possess the healing powers of the Uzumaki and the Kyubi. With them were Hinata's parents, Hayashi and Hitomi Hyuga, along with a baby Hanabi who was fast asleep in Hitomi's arms. Ever since finding out that Hinata tried to save him from the mob, Naruto had been constantly asking to see her and thank her for being one of the few people to help him, besides Tochi and Ayam, both preparing to leave Konoha and come to Yuzushio since Hyson gave them the offer of departing Konoha with them. It was a way of thanking them for being one of the few people that cared for Naruto. Of course, they were glad to be given the offer and were starting to become sick and tired of the abuse that the young blonde head had been getting over the years. Besides that, Naruto seemed to be getting along with Hinata, though he was still confused of why she was so red. Oh, when Mom learns of this, she's going to start playing matchmaker. Kushina thought, knowing that her mother was infamous for her matchmaking skills, and she would spoil both Naruto and Karen rotten since they were her grandkids. And just on cue, there was loud noises outside the door, getting higher and higher. Kushina recognized them as her mother's and the two Hyuga guards, and she decided to head out there before the guard received any unnecessary injuries. As she reached the door, her father's voice came into play, and with that the shouting died down greatly. Then Kushina opened the door, and the first person to enter her and Naruto's view was Amaya Uzumaki, Kushina's mother and Naruto's grandmother. She was almost like an older version of Kushina, with long dark red hair. Like Tasha, she had a few wrinkles, but only a few for people to think she was younger than her actual age. Her eyes were blue, and she wore a blue kimono with the Uzumaki clan symbol on it. She also had blue earrings dangling from her ears as well. Kushina. There you are, Amaya said, turning her attention from her husband. I've been looking everywhere for you. Kushina just sighed at her mother's energetic personality. Of course, I guess I'm not one to talk, she thought to herself before looking down at her son, who was still looking at Amaya with a curious face. Ne Soichi, this is your Bachan. The word Bachan woke up Naruto, and he suddenly sprinted towards Amaya, tackling her with such force that he could have brought her down if it were not for their difference in size. Bachan! He squealed with delight of having met another family member. Amaya smiled at her grandson as she lifted Naruto up to eye level. So this is my little grandson? Oh, and those whiskers marks make you look so cute and cuddly, I just want to hug you. She squealed as she pulled Naruto into a happy embracing hug, allowing her grandson to wrap his arms around her neck. The rest of the family smiled at this before Kushina noticed someone was missing. Akasen, where is Tsunade-sensei? Kushina asked. Amaya looked up at her daughter and blinked, realizing said woman wasn't around. Oh, I didn't notice she had left. I was in such a hurry to meet Naruto-kun that I wasn't aware of my surrounding. Everyone just sweat dropped at the response. She never changes, Tasha thought as he looked at his wife. Then he spoke, anyway, we've just finished with the treaty, and once Tsunade and my men have collected all of the Senju and Uzumaki belongings, we will leave. Kushina? Hitomi asked as she stepped out of her daughter's room. When she noticed both the daimyo and his wife, she let out an eep and bowed. Tashiya-sama. Amaya-sama. It is an honor to see you again. Immediately recognizing the girl, Amaya smiled. Hitomi-chan. It's good to see you again too. You've grown since I last saw you, she said as she handed her grandson back to Kushina and gave a motherly hug to the Hyuga matriarch. Their position actually put Amaya in a spot where she saw both Hayashi, who was holding Hanabi, and sitting beside Hinata, who was still in her bed. Hayashi-kun, is that you? Amaya's family watched as she went into the room and began conversing with the Hyuga family, and was soon joined by Kushina and Naruto, the latter wanting to spend some time with his grandmother. That just left Tashu and Hyson, the latter looking at his father. So how long do you suppose it will take until Kasen starts going into matchmaker mode when she sees Naruto and Hinata? Tashiya rubbed his temples, almost forgetting his wife was infamous with that. Knowing her probably soon if she's in the same room as those two. And as if right on cue they heard these two make such a cute pair, from Amaya, causing both Uzumaki males to sweat drop. Tashiya sighed while Hyson turned around and walked away, saying, I'll let Yujin-san know to have the men prepared to leave. If we don't, then Kasan will be hell-bent of having those two getting married now than later. Agreed, Tashiya said, but at the same time an idea began to worm through his head, something that made him think that his wife's personality might be infectious. Naruto-kun, please don't eat so fast. You'll make yourself sick like that. Kushina scolded her son as he was devouring every single piece of food in sight. While she was doing that, the rest of her family, including Tsunade and Shizen, were either discussing about some other topics or watching in amusement at the interaction between mother and son. It had been 4 days since they left Konoha, 3 days walking to the port by land and a day at sea heading towards the Whirlpool nation. During that time, Naruto was able to interact with the shinobi and samurai that had accompanied them and was already having a positive effect on them. Apparently, finding out you had family that loved you so much that it was suffocating had that effect on a 3-year-old boy. And combined with Naruto's usually positive personality just made it impossible for the soldiers and servants not to be fond of the young prince. He also possessed the selfless and kind characteristics that all Uzumaki have, such as when he did not want to force himself on the servants. Everyone had a good feeling that Naruto would grow into a fine young man. Then there was the meeting between Tsunade and Naruto. At first, Naruto was a little bit shy of meeting a new person since in the past his usual meetings didn't really go so well. But thanks to some encouragement from his mother, Naruto managed to greet Tsunade, with the first thing he said to her was, "My mommy is prettier than you." This was due to Naruto's belief that his mother was like a goddess compared to other women. This caused several reactions from the people gathered. Shizen and Amaya giggled at the comment, while Tashio smirked and Hyson rolled his eyes. Kushina made to scold her son for saying something rude to Tsunade, but said woman shook it off with a laugh, saying that it was understandable since she had thought the same thing with her mother and grandmother. During the ride from Konoha to the port where they would take the private ship of the Whirlpool daimyo, Naruto had bombarded his mother, uncle and grandparents with questions, like what was Whirlpool like? Were there ninja there? How big was their clan? Did they have any kind of cool abilities like the clans in Konoha? And why did they all have red hair, and if he could have red hair too? Despite all the constant babbling from Naruto, his family were only more than glad to answer his questions since he would most likely needed to be educated in both ninja arts, politics and society. Back to the present moment, as mother was trying to slow down her son's eating, a samurai approached Tashio, who was sitting beside Tsunade bending down so only the daimyo could hear, whispered, "My lord, the guest has awoken." Tashio's eyes narrowed, knowing who he was referring to. Nodding, he made a signal to Tsunade, seeing how the guest had a history with the Slug Princess. Informing the rest of their family that they would be back shortly, the two made to the bottom of the ship, where several samurai and Yuzanines were stationed at different areas of a long hallway. They made way for the Uzumaki and Senjus/Uzumaki until they finally reached a cell with bars and chakra suppression seals placed all around the cell. Inside, on his legs and waking up, was a tall man wearing a red haori on top of a green shirt and mesh armor. He had long white hair that was tied into a ponytail with a metal headgear that had the kanji of oil on it. Going down from his eyes to the bottom of his face were 2 red marks and a wart on the left side of his nose. This man was none other than Jiraiya, another of the Konoha Sannin, the Toad Sage and the world-known super pervert, along with being the late Yondaime Hokage's sensei and Naruto's godfather. Originally, after learning that Jiraiya had not been there in the beginning of Naruto's life, Kushina wanted to hunt him down and beat him to a point that would make the beating Tsunade had given her teammate when he peeked on her in the hot springs look more like a school brawl. However, Tashio advised it would be better to head home first in order to get Naruto comfortable in his new surrounding and that Hiruzen would contact him about the current events. But fate would have it that Jiraiya would be the one to find them. Flashback 2 days after leaving Konoha. Amai-chan, dear, don't you think we should continue heading towards home rather than making a pit stop? Tashio asked as said woman was holding her grandson's hand. Their group had stopped at Yugakure, the former shinobi village of the hot water country, in order to rest since not all of those who accompanied them were shinobi, and that Amai was dead set of making up her lack of gifts for Naruto's first 3 birthdays since she wasn't patient enough to wait until they got home. Nonsense, Amai said as she smiled down at Naruto, who returned it with his own foxy grin. There's a festival in the village today and I will not wait any longer until I make up for the 3 birthdays of my grandson's life that I missed. Besides, everyone could use a break, and this is the best place to do it. Tashio looked around and saw that Kushina was talking with Tsunade and Shizen, mentioning something about hot springs. Some of the others seemed to need to relax a little. With all that, Tashio sighed. Very well, but only for a few hours. I don't want any assassins to come at us while we're still in fire country, especially Danzo's route. I have a feeling that old mummy wasn't comfortable with us taking Naruto-chan. Amai rolled her eyes before looking down at Naruto. Come Naruto-chan, let's see what kind of prizes they have here. Naruto smiled. Hi Bie-chan. Then he turned towards his mother and shouted, Bye mommy. I'm going with Bie-chan, he said while waving as he, Amai and several guards walked into the village. Kushina smiled and waved back, then turned around and headed out with some of the other women towards the hot springs. With all them women gone, Tashio turned towards his son. So what will you be doing, Hyson? Tashio asked. Hyson shrugged. I'll stay with the convoy to make sure that no one gets any ideas. What about you? Tashio rubbed his chin, thinking of his options. I guess I'll find a souvenir for my nation symbols collection. Never got one from this village before, so might as well do it while I'm here. And with that he walked off, with several samurai and ninjas accompanying him. Back with Naruto, the boy had already spent 15 minutes with his grandmother, and was already having the time of his life. Back in Konoha he had never gotten the chance of going to any of the festivals because the villagers would always yell or throw him out, so he was doing so many things at once that you would almost think there was 10 of him. By now he had played multiple games and won several prizes, had a lollipop in his free hand that was almost halfway finished, and wore a funny red top hat on his head. Around his neck were 2 man-made necklaces with the Uzumaki symbol on them, one for him and the other for his mother. They were made by a blacksmith from Takumi village, the weapon forging village. But the favorite part of it all was that he was enjoying it with someone else, a family member no less. Amai had no problem catching up with her grandson, seeing how he hadn't had so much fun in such a long time, and was more than glad to spend as much money as possible for him. The pair was looking around when something caught Naruto's attention, causing him to let go of his grandma's hand and walk over towards the source of his focus. It was a toy stand with several large stuffed toys hanging on the wall while several more were lined up on the counter for display. They were about the same size or shorter than Naruto was, but what caught the boy's attention was a cute orange fox kit that had a plushy tail. He had a look of longing in his eyes as he stared at the toy in awe. Amaya, having walked beside Naruto, looked at the toy and smiled, figuring out what her grandson wanted. Looking back down, she asked, "Would you like to get that, Naruto-chan?" Naruto merely nodded his head shyly, eyes still on the toy. Amaya took Naruto's hand while the boy threw out his finished lollipop. As they walked up to the stand, the owner, an elderly woman wearing a simple brown kimono. Besides her were two younger people, a boy who appeared in his teens and had short black hair and wore a short blue kimono, while the other was a girl with long brown hair and had a green kimono. The older woman noticed Amaya and Naruto walking up to their stand and smiled at them. "Hello there, do you see something that you like?" she asked them, but it was more directed at Naruto. Naruto didn't say anything, just continued to stare at the stuffed fox. It was Amaya who responded. "Yes, my grandson is interested in that toy right there," she said, pointing at said toy. The owner looked up and smiled and soon had the boy, her grandson as it turned out, grabbed the toy and handed it to her sister so she could dust it off a bit since it was hanging up there all day and collected a bit of dirt on it. She was going to wrap it up next, but Naruto just wanted it how it was. So the teen handed the stuffed fox to the blonde head while Amaya paid for it. "What do you say, Naruto-chan?" Amaya asked her grandson. Naruto, who had already begun hugging the toy with joy, looked up at the owner. "Thank you," he said in a cheerful voice. The older woman just smiled back and wished them a good day. As they were walking, Naruto looked up at his grandmother. "Ba-chan, can I go and show mommy what I got?" he asked in a cute voice. Amaya smiled. "I don't see why not." She turned towards one of their guards. "Do you happen to know where Kushina-chan went to?" she asked in a kind voice. Amaya Uzumaki, like all members of their clans, was raised to not act in a superior manner towards others because of their status. They treated everyone, servants, allies, friends, and even enemies, with respect and equality. This is what made the Uzumaki clan so well loved and respected by other clans and villages. Even their enemies had to admit that their non-arrogant attitude was something to be commended. The samurai bowed. "I believe Kushina-sama, Tsunade-sama, and Shizen-sen mentioned something about going to the hot springs." Before anyone could react, Naruto made a dash towards said location, excited to show his mother what he got. He laughed cheerfully as any other child his age would as his grandmother and guards tried to catch up with Kushina. The buxom blonde known as Tsunade Senju let out a sigh of content as she sank deeper into the hot, refreshing water, while Kushina and Shizen were already relaxing. Around them were several other women, some visiting the festival, others passing by or from the village, all of them enjoying the nice, relaxing water that they were buried in. A few of them, however, were whispering to each other as they looked at the legendary Sannin and the princess of the Whirlpool nation. This, however, did not go unnoticed by the two said women and the older one's apprentice, but they ignored it as they were used to such things. "You know, no matter how much I think about it, Yugakyu's hot springs are on a whole different level than anywhere else," Kushina murmured as she stretched her legs underwater. "And their casinos," Tsunade said, which was soon followed by a familiar glint in her eyes. She looked at Kushina. "Speaking of which." Kushina sighed and shook her head. "No, sensei, we're not going to any casinos. The only reason we stopped here is because Mom wanted to begin spoiling Naruto-kun before we got home. You'll have to talk to her if you want to go and gamble." She smirked inside when she saw her sensei make a face in defeat. Despite being the strongest kunoichi and the greatest medical nin in the world, not even Tsunade was brave enough to go up against Amaya Uzumaki. Hell, she doubt even her grandfather was brave enough to go against an Uzumaki woman, like his wife for example. "I'm still surprised that Hokage-sama allowed Naruto-kun to be abused like that," Shizen commented. She and her master had read through Naruto's medical files, which was so large that it needed its own shelf just to fit it all. While they were disgusted about how villagers treated an innocent boy, it was worse when Kushina read them. Tsunade literally had to use her full strength in order to keep the redhead from razing the entire village to the ground. Swanda sighed. Sensei was always the type of guy that had too much faith in the people of the village. Though while I'm sure that he did his best to protect the kid, but with those two old buzzards of teammates of his, along with that bastard Danzo, it probably wasn't easy. Before they could go any deeper into the topic, everyone was silent when they heard someone scream, "Mommy!" With Naruto. Naruto was running around the area of the hot spring, all of his prizes being watched by a samurai. He was upset that the receptionist wouldn't let him go into the ladies' side since men weren't allowed in there, but he didn't argue because his grandmother, who had caught up with him, said that the receptionist was only doing her job and following the rules. He still didn't get it, he just wanted to show his mommy what he won. What was wrong with that? Anyhow, that is how Naruto ended up exploring the outside area of the facility, since Amaya didn't want to go any further because she didn't want bad people to get him. His mind began to drift off to their eventual arrival to his new home in Whirlpool. His mommy had said that the Uzumaki clan were the highest nobility since they founded both the country and its shinobi village. In fact, Naruto's grandfather was the current daimyo while Kushina was next in line, followed by Naruto. When Naruto asked where they would be staying, Kushina replied in the daimyo's palace, which was supposedly the most beautiful and protective place in the world. While he had never seen a daimyo's palace, he remembered hearing from the old man, Hiruzen, that they were very big places with fancy stuff hanging everywhere. But he was more focused on if he would make any friends there or if people would like him. He didn't want people to be nice to him just because he was a prince according to his mommy. He wanted them to like him for who he was. However, his musings were cut off when he heard giggling from somewhere close. From what he could tell, it was coming somewhere from behind the hot springs, and his grandmother never said that he couldn't go there. So with that in mind, he decided to investigate. What he found was the oddest thing he had ever seen in his short life. It was a man that Naruto was for sure about. He had long white spiky hair that was tied into a long ponytail. On his head was a forehead protector with horns and had the kanji for oil written on it. He wore a red haori on top of a short green kimono that matched his pants. On his feet were red geta, Japanese sandals, and finally a large scroll was strapped to his back. But what confused Naruto was that the man was peeking through the wooden wall of the hot springs, a light blush on his face along with an odd-looking smile and finally a notepad and pencil in his hands. Seeing how the man had not noticed his presence yet, Naruto decided to try and figure out what he was looking at. Fortunately, he managed to find a hole in the wall that was about his height. What he saw was an entire room filled with women naked. What's so funny about seeing naked ladies? Naruto innocently thought to himself as he looked back and forth at the old man and then the naked women. But then his eyes caught onto three familiar figures. It was his mother, Tsunade, and Shizen, and they were also naked. Still not understanding why the man was looking at the women while they were naked, Naruto, however, did not like that he was spying on his mother. So with that in mind, Naruto stomped on over and poked the white-haired man in the leg. "Hey mister, stop spying on them, it's rude," he said in a serious tone for a 3-year-old. However, he got no response from the man who just kept on giggling and taking notes. Getting annoyed, Naruto kicked the man in the leg. "Hey mister, didn't you hear me? Stop looking at them. It's rude." The only response he got this time, however, was something wet and slimy wrapping around his waist and pulling him back. Startled, Naruto looked back and saw that he was in the clutches of a giant toad's mouth. "Quiet, Gaki, can't you see I'm doing my research?" the man said without looking at Naruto. The sudden realization of being in the grip of a giant animal that could possibly hurt him caused painful memories of the past to enter Naruto's mind. Soon the young Uzumaki began tearing up as he struggled to get free. But when that came to no avail, he did the only thing he could at the time. So with tears now pouring down his face, he yelled with all his might, "Mommy!" The response was instant. A portion of the wall in front of Naruto was suddenly destroyed, shocking only the toad and the man since Naruto was still bawling his eyes out. As the dust settled, the form of a towel-covered Kushina Uzumaki with her signature 9-tailed red hair floating in the air could be seen, followed by Tsunade and Shizen and several other women clad in towels. The redhead had a frantic look on her face as she scanned for her son. When her eyes locked onto the toad that had her son wrapped around its tongue, she yelled, "Naruto Kyuen!" And she followed it up with a powerful kick to the toad's face, sending it flying while releasing its grip on Naruto, who was promptly caught by his mother, and thus began crying into her shoulder. Tsunade, who recognized the toad as a summoning, had a tick mark forming on her face when she finally spotted the white-haired man, aka her ex-teammate Jiraiya, who had now gone pale as a ghost when he realized that not only had he been caught but that Tsunade had been one of the women he had been spying on. "Jiraiya, you Yarobaka! How dare you spy on us and harm an innocent child?" And before Jiraiya could even get a glance at the son and mother, he was pounced by both Tsunade and the rest of the women, screaming in terror as their righteous female fury struck his body. Flashback and current time. The outcome of it all was obvious. Once the women had finished beating the perverted sage into a pulp, Kushina continued the assault after learning that not only had Jiraiya scared Naruto with his summons, but also because Naruto was trying to stop the pervert from spying on them. Of course, this only earned Jiraiya more of a beating from the women again, since they were now angry that someone would try and harm an innocent child. Fortunately, the guards had finally arrived, apologizing profusely to Kushina for not realizing Naruto had wandered off. Then upon Kushina's order they arrested the now shell of the Toad Sage to bring back to Whirlpool for trial of both spying on the princess of Whirlpool, harming her son as well as discarding his promise to take care of the boy over the past 3 years. That is where we find ourselves now, with Tashio and Tsunade waiting for Jiraiya to wake up. "Oh Kami, my head," Jiraiya moaned as he got up. "I feel like I just got trampled by several large toads." "I'm surprised that you recovered so fast, Jiraiya," Tashio said, catching the Toad Sage's attention. "A woman's wrath is not something to be trifled with." "Tashio-sama." Then he looked at the person besides the daimyo. "Tsunade-heim." "What? How?" "Well, currently you're being detained on Tashio-sama's personal boat heading towards Whirlpool country after you got your rear handed to you again," Tsunade said as she glared at her former teammate, causing Jiraiya to shrink at the glare. "When we get there you'll be facing trial for your crimes against the Uzumaki clan. Pray that we don't leave the final decision in Kushina-chan's hands," Tashio added. Jiraiya's eyes widened at the name of his late student's wife. "Wait, Kushina is alive?" he yelled as he grabbed onto the bars of his cell. "How come she didn't stay with Naruto?" His answer was him getting lightly shocked from the seals attached to the bar, activated by Tashio. "Do not even think about changing the subject, Jiraiya," Tashio growled as he leaked out some killing intent. "In fact, where have you been? Did you even know how much Naruto-kun had suffered over the past 3 years? Kushina-chan nearly went on a rampage upon reading his medical files. You had better pray that either she or Amaya-chan don't show them to him for Konoha's sake." Jiraiya and Tsunade both shuddered at who he was referring to. The person he meant was none other than Tashio's father, Sadhiko Uzumaki, the most powerful man in existence. His powers were greater than that of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, and some have said that he might be the reincarnation of the Rakuta Sennin, or at the very least his equal. The Uzumaki clan had settled in the Whirlpool nation long before the birth of Hashirama and Madara, living in isolation and away from the wars of the other clans. But it was Sadhiko, who had become clan leader at 10 and daimyo by the age of 15. He also was the one who ended their isolationism and formed a truce with their cousin clan the Senju, as well as inviting the 14 other clans onto their land and making Uzushio that it is today. The Uzumaki male was not only a master of Fuinjutsu, but also Kenjutsu too. But what made him so feared were his skills in Anmayatan, Yin-Yang release, the same power that the Hamura Otsutsuki possessed, as he had the Rinnegan just like his brother. Though the sage's Rinnegan was more akin to the Sharingan, while Hamura's was more akin to the Byakugan. Using Anmayatan he could create anything from nearby, such as the ground, water, tree, the air, and even his own body, similar how Hashirama used his Mokuton. Along with that he could also use Yin release and Yang release, the two chakra natures that created Yin-Yang release. And even to back that up, Sadhiko, the Shodame Yuzukage, along with the clan heads of Uzushio's other clans at the time, were praised as the most powerful shinobis in Uzushio's history. Furthermore, he was very, very loyal to his clan and friends. In fact, there was a story that once he single-handedly destroyed 2 clans for trying to kill his younger sister, Mito Uzumaki. They didn't even last a week when he found them, and the only survivors were the civilian members of the clan as well as children, since Sadhiko didn't like killing the defenseless or young. If Sadhiko learned what happened to Naruto, his own great-grandson, then Konoha would be razed into the ground. Finally regaining his composure, Jiraiya gave a defiant glare at the Whirlpool daimyo. "Look, I understand that you're angry, and yes, I didn't know that Naruto was having a hard life, but you have to understand that I couldn't take him with me. My spy network is important for Konoha to stay ahead of the other villages. I did send him money once a month so he could live on his own." That just made Tashio glare at the Toad Sage more. "If you knew he was suffering, you should have contacted me. The Uzumaki clan would never allow one of our own to be treated so horribly. But instead our own spies found out about Naruto's existence 3 months ago, when you could have just told us 3 years ago. What's your excuse for that?" Jiraiya cringed at that act. It was Minato's wish that Naruto would grow up to become a shinobi for Konoha. How could I deny the dying wish of my prized pupil? Furthermore, the other 4 great villages have at least 2 Jinchuriki. Allowing you to take Naruto would have destroyed the balance between the 5 great nations. His response was another shock of electricity from the security seals, sending Jiraiya to land on his butt. "The way you say it, Jiraiya, is like you see Naruto-kun only as a weapon. In fact, if I had to guess, I would have to say that you thought the same of my daughter and aunt when they held the kyubi in them." The mention of her grandmother being referred as a weapon caused Tsunade to glare at her teammate. "I will leave you for now, Jiraiya. And if you make any more excuses like Kakashi did, then Kushina will do the same to you that she did to him," Tashio finally added, remembering when Kushina had cornered the copy Nin one day, demanding to know why he wasn't there for Naruto. When Kakashi gave his reason, which was he was grieving so much after the loss of Minato, Kushina had literally punched him so hard in the face that he might have lost all of his teeth, and after that a serious scolding of learning to deal with the pain and taking responsibility. because she also grieved for the loss of her husband and child, but that didn't stop her from going on with her life. With that, Tashio and Tsunade walked out, leaving Jiraiya to his own musings. Several hours later. "Mommy, look! It's land!" Naruto shouted with glee as he stood at the front of the ship, pointing ahead at the first land he had seen since sailing. True enough, the land of Whirlpool was coming into sight. From their view, the people on the ship could see several tall mountains on the island, the sandy beach just a few miles ahead, and before that multiple jagged rocks with seals on them. But what stood out the most were the large whirlpools that spun around in the ocean. "Yes, Soichi, that's Whirlpool country," Kushina said gently as she grabbed a jumpy Naruto so he wouldn't accidentally trip. "That's home." Naruto's eyes widened as he looked back at the upcoming island with a look now of longing in his eyes. But that quickly changed when he asked, "But mommy, how will we get past the big swirly water holes?" Naruto asked, not knowing that they were whirlpools. Kushina just giggled before responding. "Those Naruto-kun are whirlpools, which is why the nation is called Land of the Whirlpools. And don't worry, they are man-made by the first female clan head, Oto Muzumaki. The whirlpools make a path for anyone of Uzumaki blood so that way we can enter while they protect the island as well. And if other people come, then we have sealing barriers that alert us on land, allowing barrier teams to control the whirlpools on our own." Naruto made a new sound, amazed of how powerful their clan was before looking out in front of him again. Sure enough, the whirlpools began to part in order to make a path for the boat to go on. Even some of the soldiers and servants, who had seen this hundreds of times, were still in awe at how the whirlpools moved upon the command of the Uzumaki clan. But to Naruto it was something much more, something that he always dreamed of: home. A home, with a family, people who love him and he loves them back as well. There was one thing that Naruto knew for certain: he couldn't wait to start his new life. Whirlpool Palace. Big, that was the only word Naruto could find in his limited vocabulary to describe the palace. As he held on to his mother's hand, his eyes were taking in every detail of his new home. The 5 large towers surrounding the 6th, and larger, tower in the center all had large version of the clan's symbols around them, followed by other strange markings that made the towers look unique. Surrounding the towers were multiple smaller buildings with a few connected via bridges. And around all of that was a large pearl white wall with multiple people standing on them, which his mother had said that they were the guards. But the amazing thing was that the entire palace was on an island within the nation with several whirlpools in the water surrounding it. The only thing connecting the mini-island to the rest of the country was a long road of dirt that Naruto and the rest of the convoy was currently riding on. However, Naruto noticed that there were some people missing, including his uncle. "Mommy, where did Uncle Hyson, Auntie Tsunade, and Shizen-ichan go?" Naruto asked as he looked at the red-haired woman. Kushina smiled as she pulled her son onto her lap, which made Naruto unconsciously snuggle into her. "Tsunade-sensei and Shizen went back to Yuzushio with Uncle Hyson because they had to check the hospital. Uncle Hyson is bringing his family here. I'm sure your cousin Karen will be very excited to meet you, Soichi, since you two are about the same age." She didn't mention that Hyson had sent word to Hiruzen that Jiraiya had been arrested during their return to Whirlpool and would be held for trial for spying on the Whirlpool princess and assaulting her son. Furthermore, there might be a chance of Sadhiko making a visit to Konoha because of these events and of Naruto's treatment in Konoha. Truthfully, the wrath of the Red God was not a pretty sight, but Sadhiko would eventually find out because anything related to the Uzumaki clan was to be brought to his attention. Naruto giggled happily at the idea of finally meeting another family member his age along with the rest of the clan. In fact, he was so engrossed with speaking to his mother that he hadn't realized that they had passed the palace gate until Kushina lifted him off her lap. "Well, Soichi, we're here. Your new home." At the mention of home, Naruto excitedly bounced out of the carriage, taking his first steps onto the palace floor. He looked up and gasped at the reception waiting for them. Before him were hundreds of samurais, servants, officials, and even a few ninjas standing in perfect lines with banners high in the air. Not being used to so many people, Naruto began to feel shy and hid behind his mother, who had already gotten out of the carriage. Kushina just smiled at this as her mother and father joined them. "Well, what do you think, Naruto-kun?" Tashia asked his grandson. Naruto peeked his head out of his mother's kimono, looking at all the people staring back at him, looks of awe in their eyes. "Big," he whispered as his mother finally picked him up into her arms. Soon the group began walking towards the palace as the gathered people made way for the return of their lord, lady, princess, and the lost son. While they were doing that, their escorts were unloading the supplies brought with them, including the Ichiraku stuff. Time seemed to go by Naruto as his eyes took in every detail of the palace, both outside and inside, marveling at the beauty it showed. He didn't even notice that a servant had walked up towards the group and said to the elder Uzumaki members, "Tashia-sama, Amaya-sama, yours along with Kushina-sama and Naruto-sama are requested in the clan meeting room." Sadhiko-sama has been waiting for your return and would like to discuss about what transpired at Konoha, the servant said. Kushina was surprised by this as she held tightly to Naruto's hand so he wouldn't wander off. Gigi is here? I thought we would meet him at the Tenzin. The Tenzin, Heaven Mountain, was a large, at least over 500 feet, single tower in the more isolated parts of the country. It was created when the Uzumaki clan settled on the island and isolated in order for privacy. The Tenzin's sole purpose was to act as a library, lab, archive, and to some a retirement home. Sadhiko had retired there for the rest of his days, in order to continue his hobby of knowledge since he could no longer travel around the world. He rarely comes out of the tower these days unless it is important. He only had a few other people with him since he did like to have company inside the large tower, though not a lot. I should have expected father to come here rather than wait for us at the Tenzin, Tashio exclaimed as he and the others began heading towards the meeting room. He always wants to know of new things concerning the clan and never has the patience to wait, he added, earning some agreements from the others. A few minutes later the group had arrived to the clan meeting room, which was a lone room with a wide table with several chairs surrounding it. Hanging from the walls were the clan symbols along with the heads of each of the 9 bijou. And there was a man at the other end of the table. The man was busy drinking a large cup of sake. He appeared around the same age as Hiruzen but with a mix of gray and red spiky hair with a ponytail going down his back. There was also a short red beard on his chin, which matched his red eyebrows. He wore a simple black kimono underneath a dark blue haori that he wore like a cape. The haori had the clan symbol on its back too. Leaning against the table was a staff with the clan symbol on the top of it. Also, unlike Hiruzen, he had less wrinkles on his face but a scar that went across his forehead and connected with another scar that went over his left eye, though he could still use said eye. When the man was done drinking his sake, he looked towards the new arrivals, revealing his dark blue eyes. Yo, the man finally said. Tashio, what in Kami's name took you so long? I practically slept here waiting for you to come back. Anoka-chan is probably going to give me an earful when I get back. I even drank all the sake I was saving for you lot too. Tashio scratched the back of his head sheepishly while Amaya pinched her nose, both of them annoyed at the laid-back attitude of the most powerful man in the world. Kushina merely giggled while Naruto stared quizzically at the old man. Mommy, who is that? Naruto asked Kushina. Hearing Naruto's voice, Sadhiko looked down until he spotted the blonde-haired boy. With a simple gesture of his finger, Naruto was suddenly lifted into the air, causing the young boy to let out a yelp as he realized his feet were no longer on the ground. Calm down, child, I just want to meet you, Sadhiko said as the other adults watched in amusement as Naruto slowly floated towards the elder Uzumaki while the others watched with amusement. A few seconds later, Naruto was softly placed on the table right before Sadhiko Uzumaki. Said boy, still stunned about what happened, that he didn't notice Sadhiko studying him until the older Uzumaki began moving his finger towards him. So you're my great-grandson, Naruto, huh? Sadhiko said as he poked Naruto lightly on the left cheek. That seemed to annoy Naruto, and in response he bopped Sadhiko on the nose. Naruto-kun, Kushina scolded. Don't hit your Hijiji, she said. However, Sadhiko merely chuckled at Naruto. It wasn't a loud chuckle or manically, it was a simple, kind chuckle full of amusement. In fact, Naruto couldn't help but giggle in response, especially when Sadhiko gave Naruto a foxy grin and rustled his hair. I like you, kid, you definitely got the spirit of the Uzumaki, Sadhiko said as he rustled Naruto's hair a little bit more. Naruto nodded but then pouted. Hijiji, why does everyone in my family have red hair? He asked innocently. As Sadhiko and Naruto were discussing about topic of red and hair, Kushina was conversing with her parents. I'm glad to see Naruto-kun is getting along so well with Gigi, Kushina whispered to her parents. Tashio nodded as he took a brief glance at the two spiky hair people. Indeed. I remember that Aunt Mito told me what father was like when he was a child. If I have to make a guess, I think Naruto-kun would be like a younger version of him. Yes, and Naruto seems to be very comfortable with him despite meeting Sadhiko-sama just a few seconds ago, Amaya said. Kushina was about to comment on that when Sadhiko said something that caught their attentions. Oh, by the way, Naruto-kun, I got you gift, Sadhiko said and smirked when he saw the stars in Naruto's eyes. I'm guessing you would like it now. Naruto nodded excitedly. Sadhiko digged through his person and soon pulled out a book with a circle of 12 rings on the cover. Each circle had the kanji of each zodiac written in them. This is a very special book of mine, Naruto-kun, Sadhiko explained as he handed the book to the boy. Naruto had a look of awe on his face as he stared at the cover. And when you read the book, amazing things happen when you do, the elder Uzumaki finished. Naruto's look of awe turned into a sad frown, something that Sadhiko noticed. But Hijiji, I don't know how to read, Naruto said with a sniff at the end. Kushina, Toshio and Amaya had looks of shock on their faces while Sadhiko's was blank. Finally the elder Uzumaki asked, "What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Weren't you taught how to read while in Konoha?" Sadhiko asked. He was confused because all kids Naruto's age should know how to read and he had not been told of Naruto's treatment at Konoha. Naruto shook his head sadly, and you could see tears beginning to form. "No, the mean lady at the orphanage would always yell at me whenever I came for story time or lessons. When I wouldn't leave she would hit me really hard in the face, and call me a filthy demon, and that demons should stay dumb." He finished, and then tears began to slowly go down his face. Sadhiko's head was down, his hair blocking his face as he took in what Naruto just said. To everyone but Naruto, the elder let out a very demonic aura that threatened to engulf the whole room, the palace even. Finally, after a few seconds of silence, Sadhiko looked up at his great-grandson with a kind smile. "Well, Naruto-kun, just because you don't know how to read doesn't mean you can't learn. I'm sure your mom would be happy to teach you how to read. And if you like, I or others can help you too. Would you like that?" Naruto raised his head and let out a weak smile in response, earning a wide smile from Sadhiko, though the adults knew it was fake, hiding the growing anger behind it. "Great, now I'm sure you're tired, Naruto-kun, so I'll let your mother take you to your new room." Then he made a gesture to Kushina, who quickly came up to her son and picked her son, allowing him to snuggle into her shoulder. "What do you say, Naruto-kun?" Kushina asked sweetly. Naruto, with the book still in his hands, looked at Sadhiko and said in a soft voice, "Thank you, Hijiji." Sadhiko smiled again and watched as mother and son walked out of the room, leaving Sadhiko and the grandparents behind. The moment the door closed, however, Sadhiko looked directly at his son and daughter-in-law, the two stiffening at the cold glare the elder Uzumaki was giving them. "You two mind telling me what the hell happened in Konoha?" Toshio and Amaya both looked at each other and gulped. One thing was for certain, the fate of Konoha hanged in the balance of those two as they began explaining Naruto's life in Konoha to the most powerful person alive. Konoha. Life in Konoha had changed rapidly in just a few days. News about Naruto's lineage struck a major dent in the village's morale. Not only had they been abusing the son of their greatest hero since the Shodaime Hokage, but also a member of the Uzumaki clan's noble family. Many wealth and greedy merchant families realized that they lost their chance to reach royalty by setting up an engagement marriage between Naruto and their daughters. The shinobi forces took it the hardest. Many of them had trouble looking at themselves in the mirror. Because every time they did, they remembered how they caused Naruto so much pain, whether directly or indirectly, and then get even more depressed that they harmed an innocent boy and only child of the Yondaime Hokage. Another thing was that they felt naked without the symbol on their vests, the symbol of the Uzumaki clan, cousin clan of the Senju. All in all, the mood in Konoha had gone down a few degrees, none of them thinking that this couldn't get any worse. What? They were wrong. Back in the council room, the Shinobi Council, Civilian Council, elders and the Hokage were discussing about the new changes to Konoha done by the Uzumaki clan, as well as some things that Hiruzen had discovered amongst the papers from civilians. Since he learned the secret of defeating paperwork, the Sandaime discovered that many civilian council members were trying to gain more power and chewed them down about the treason they were committing. They were now listening to Danzo about increasing their military now with the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki gone when a Chunin came in with a letter with the Uzumaki clan's symbol. The letter that Hiruzen read is what made him yell just now. "Sandaime-sama, what is it? What happened?" Kohara asked her former teammate. Hiruzen put the letter down and rubbed his nose, mumbling to himself. Finally he calmed down and looked at the rest of the council. "I just received word from the Hokage that Jiraiya of the Sannin was arrested a few days ago and taken into Whirlpool custody." There were a lot of gasps from the other council members. Finally Shiba asked, "What are the charges?" Hiruzen reread the letter before responding. The first is neglecting his duties as Naruto-kun's godfather. The second was that harming said boy with one of his summons. And the last one, he sighed again when he read it again, was that he was caught spying on the women's hot spring while Kushina-chan was in said area, thus meaning he was violating the Whirlpool's princess's personal space. At that everyone just groaned loudly or slammed their heads repeatedly on the table. They just couldn't believe of how bad everything has been going in just a few days. They just narrowly avoided the wrath of the powerful Uzumaki clan, and now they might have to face it again. "Will this affect us in any way?" Choza asked. Hiruzen rubbed his nose. "I'm not entirely sure. All I can say is that it's most likely that Jiraiya will probably be banned from the Whirlpool Nation. The chances of him being executed are slim, but I'll send a letter to Toshio-sama and apologize for my student's behavior. Now I'll have to see what the rest of the letter says." Everyone raised an eyebrow, wondering why the Hokage's voice slowed down as he read the rest of the letter. Then his skin began to pale and his left eye began to twitch violently. "Hiruzen? Hamaru asked his former teammate, trying to figure out what was wrong with him. After a few seconds, Hiruzen managed to find his voice, but his face was still pale. They said there is a chance that we might get a visit from Sadhiko Uzumaki. The elders and the clan heads paled at the name, while the rest were confused, not knowing the meaning behind the name, which is why one of the civilian council members asked, who is this Sadhiko? He doesn't sound like much. I'm sure someone of your caliber can deal with him, Hokage-sama. The Hokage, along with the elders and clan heads, looked at the man like he lost his mind. Finally, Hiruzen decided to educate them. I doubt I could even make Sadhiko sweat. He's known as the Red God, the Destroyer, Red Sage, and the Titan's Wrath. His powers are limitless. In fact, many have said that he's either the reincarnation of the Rikudo Sennin, or his equal. Not even Hashirama-sensei or Madara Uchiha could beat him, even working together. Those words made everyone stare at the Hokage in disbelief. They looked at the three elders, and when they got nods of confirmation, made them pale. Finally, Tsum asked, wait, you said that Shodame-sama and Madara Uchiha couldn't beat this man? How old is he? Hiruzen was searching for his pipe. He knew he was going to need a good smoke to explain all of this. From what sensei told me, Sadhiko is Hashirama's 9 years older than him, also his brother-in-law and his, Madara, and Mito's sensei, meaning he's like 100 years old. He put his pipe in his mouth before continuing. Also, there is a rumor that he was the one who taught Hashirama how to utilize his Mokutan, and even discovered the secrets of the Sharingan. My sensei even told me that Sadhiko-sama once took down 2 entire clans when they tried to kill his little sister, Mito-sama. Along with Fuinjutsu, he is skilled in Kenjutsu, Taijutsu, and Ninjutsu, specifically Omniton, and the way he uses it is on a wide scale. If they weren't feeling scared before, the council certainly was scared now if this man was as strong as the Hokage says he is. Isn't there something we can do? Asked a nervous civilian council member, hoping for some kind of way to fight off this possible threat. Before Hiruzen could respond, he was interrupted by a loud, Hiruzen Sarutobi. In Konoha's plaza. Very few ninjas can fly. Despite it being seen as an ability that would be extremely useful, very few ninjas can really do it. The only known people who can accomplish such a feat are the current Sachikage, Inoki, and his sensei, the night-aimed Sachikage, Mu. But the man to beat them to it was none other than Sadhiko Uzumaki, who could move at light speed when he was angry, and right now he was very angry. That is why he arrived to Konoha so quickly. Every word that his son and his wife said when explaining Naruto's treatment at Konoha, the room they were in was slowly starting to crack and break as the elder Uzumaki's temper rose. Finally, the moment they were done, he bolted out of the room, the palace, and the nation faster than you could say oh crap. So now Sadhiko was in the center of a crater he made upon landing in Konoha's plaza, throwing people off their feet and sending several stands backwards. Shinobi had already begun to gather around him even before he yelled out the Sandaime Hokage's name, but none of them dared to try and approach the Uzumaki, who was literally radiating golden chakra from his body, even making it visible. A few shinobi, either brave or stupid, however, charged towards him, weapons raised. But the old Uzumaki merely swung his arms, releasing a whirlwind of golden chakra, sending those fools and others flying backwards. As he continued heading towards the mansion, a Nara clan member used his shadow possession technique to try and stop Sadhiko's movements. Keyword try, as his shadow soon broke from Sadhiko's, shocking the Nara greatly. You're 100 years too early to hold me down, brat. Sadhiko yelled as he slammed his fists against the wind, like he hit something. And when he did, cracks formed in the air and then sent a shockwave/earthquake that caused the Nara member, more people, and the buildings in its way flying backwards. He's a monster! A Chunin, having just arrived with a new group of shinobi, said upon witnessing Sadhiko's action. Hearing the ninja's comment, Sadhiko disappeared and slammed the Chunin into the ground, causing a crater with them as the epicenter. The impact also sent the shinobi around them to lose their balance and fall on their butts. The Chunin who made the comment, and current felt multiple bones snapping from the pressure of Sadhiko's foot on his chest, saw that the old Uzumaki's eyes were now glowing gold that was similar to the golden chakra around him. You bastards laid a hand on this monster's family, making them weep for 3 years. Sadhiko replied in a deep, dark, demonic voice. Don't even think for a second that laws or gods will be able to protect you. The Chunin as well as various other shinobi literally shit themselves upon hearing that declaration, as well as his killing intent leaking out. Sadhiko then picked up the Chunin and threw him violently into some other shinobi. The old Uzumaki was about to continue his trek when he found himself facing Hiruzen Sarutobi, the clan heads, and a large detachment of ANBU. Behind them were more shinobi as well as a few civilians, including the civilian council. Despite this large number of strong shinobi, the group clearly showed signs of intimidation from the power Sadhiko was still leaking out. Hiruzen decided to speak, and hoped he could calm this godlike man down. Greetings Sadhiko-sama, it's in. Cut the crap Monkigaki Sadhiko interrupted the Hokage. You know why I'm here and you know that you brats don't stand a rat's ass against me. He finished the sentence. He released some killing intent, making a lot of people very, very nervous. Now I'll be merciful and give you 5 minutes to give me a reason for not pounding this damn village to the ground. Hiruzen swallowed deeply before he spoke, saying each word carefully. I already know why you're here, because of how your great-grandson was treated. He cringed as Sadhiko released some more chakra. The output caused glass about 3 miles to shatter due to the pressure, along with nearby buildings to crack a little. But I swear blaming the entire village for only what a few did is not something you would do, nor would Kushina-chan or Naruto-kun appreciate you taking away lives for something that happened in the past. Hiruzen said hastily, doing his best to prevent less damage to be done to the village. He knew for a fact that being the third person called the god of shinobi, not even he nor perhaps all of the ninjas of Konoha could stand a chance against an angry Sadhiko Uzumaki. Sadhiko just stared at Hiruzen before responding. You're full of BS, monkey boy, he roared, sending some of the clan heads and the other shinobi back flying. Despite saying that you did your best for Naruto-kun, you allowed your damn age to take over your duties as leader and honoring your successor's final wish. Do you have any idea how much Kushina-chan wept for the past 3 years? Or how much Naruto-kun suffered because of your incompetence? Sadhiko asked but kept going, not waiting for an answer. Furthermore, you are an idiot for literally announcing to the whole village of Naruto-kun's status. Don't you know a Jinchuriki's identity is supposed to be kept a secret? I mean, how do you suppose Mitonichan or Kushina-chan managed to live here without facing constant scorn from these idiots? Then he glared at the 3 elders and some of the civilians. And you people are even bigger idiots. No, you're even worse than idiots. Hell, calling you guys bugs wouldn't be enough to title you guys as. It would be an insult to bugs everywhere. You 3, he said, looking at Koharu, Hamaru and Danzo. Keep thinking military-like and stuff, that you don't think about a person's feelings. How the hell are you guys Tobirama students if you can't even understand something like that? He roared, unleashing a blast of chakra that sent buildings and people, noticeable the civilian council members, flying into the air and landing somewhere else in the village. Then he glared specifically at Danzo. And don't think I haven't figured out what you wanted to do with my great-grandson, mummy boy. This comment called Danzo to narrow his eye at Sadhiko. And as for you lot, he said, turning to the civilian council members and the people they represent as well as shinobi. What the hell is wrong with you? He roared, causing some of the weak-willed to faint from the killer intent, which included some jonins and A and BU since this was Sadhiko we were talking about. You ninjas should have at least an idea of how sealing works. Furthermore, you idiots can't see over your own grief that you're abusing an innocent child for something that he had no control over, as well as the fact that he lost his father, and nearly his mother on the night he was born. And to top it all off, some of you people have kids and yet you scorn, yell and sometimes beat a child about the same age. After that ranting, a lot of people had the decency to lower their heads in shame. As much as they wanted to deny it, they knew that Sadhiko was saying the absolute truth. Sadhiko turned his attention back to Hiruzen, who looked like he aged a few years. I want to destroy this village, or at least leave you lot so hurt it will take 10 generations for you to recover. Sadhiko said calmly but still in a serious tone. But for now and for the sake of Mito-chan, I'll let the guilt and shame you people are feeling be punishment enough for what you have done. But he paused as the golden chakra began to appear once again. If any of you ever hurt my family, my friends, or anyone I hold dear, he slammed his fist down into the ground. The result was a large crack coming from the spot towards an abandoned building, which caused said building to explode. I will bring my wrath upon you all. Taking their gaping faces in silence as a confirmation, Sadhiko prepared to take his leave. Now if you excuse me, I need to be heading home. I have a celebration to attend as well as a trial for that perverted student of your Hiruzen. And with that, the most powerful man since the Rakuta Sannin took off into the air, leaving Konoha behind with buildings ruined and people in pain, both physically and emotionally. Uzumaki Clan Meeting Room. The Uzumaki Council was made up of 9 members, including Hyson, the current clan head, while Tashu, Amaya, Sadhiko, Kushina, and Kane, who was Tashu and Amaya's third child and the younger brother of Hyson and Kushina, were considered honorary members. Unlike other clan councils, which would consist of the clan's elders, the Uzumaki Council consisted of clan members that were recognized for their skills, influence, and personality. Most of them were in their 40s or 50s, but the others were younger, like in their 20s or 30s. The youngest member currently was 17, the youngest member ever, second only to Sadhiko, who joined the council at the age of 15, and became the clan head too. The reason why Tashu was not clan head is due to his status as the country's ruler, as well as according to a law set by Sadhiko during the village's founding. Tashu couldn't be clan head and daimyo, as many felt it would give the Uzumaki clan too much power. However, right now Toshio took over as head of the council due to Hyson needed back in Yuzushio, and that it concerned his grandson who was to take the title of daimyo after Toshio's daughter Kushina. Along with Toshio, one of the members was Tatsuo Uzumaki, who was the tallest member of the council. He had 2 scars forming an X across his face, which made his hardened face even more intimidating. He had a few gray strands of hair mixed with his red hair, which was loosely hanging down from to his neck. His skin was tanned and body well toned. Hokage wore a long black fur coat with knot shirt underneath and brown long pants and sandals. He was renowned for his immense strength and 2 piston gauntlets he used in battle during the Third Shinobi World War, earning him the name Kaidana. He was trained by Sadhiko and, like his sensei, was firmly loyal to his family and friends. Besides him was Renga Uzumaki, one of the 2 women members and the oldest woman and second oldest member on the council, and was around Kushina's age. Despite being in her mid-40s, she was still very attractive, with her smooth, white pale skin, long silk red hair tied in a long ponytail. Madoka wore a simple but elegant purple-red kimono with water droplets on it, and revealed her ample bosom. She was well known as a doctor and scientist. Along with that, her skills in combining barrier ninjutsu with medical ninjutsu put her on par with Tsunade. She was well respected due to her calm nature and being the voice of reason, along with a bit of humor too. Next up was Hahen Uzumaki, the clan's most skilled archer. He had spiky red hair that reached his neck and unusual yellow eyes that seemed to clash with his tan skin. He wore a red flak jacket over a black sweatshirt, and black fingerless gloves over his hands. For lower attire, Hahen wore dark blue shinobi pants and black sandals with bandages wrapped around the ankles and above. Resting on the desk were visors. Hahen rarely talked unless he had to and could remain calm even in the most dangerous of situations. After Hahen was Jukuna Uzumaki, head of the daimyo's royal guard, the Sekioku and Tashia's younger brother and Sadahiko's second son. Jukuna was also known as the Shinka no Borii for the menacing aura around him as well as appearance. He wore the Sekioku uniform, which was a red jacket with black trims and black sleeve collars. The pants were the opposite of that, the majority being black with the bottom with a red collar. Over that he wore a black cape with a hood. The cape was around his body and held by a small zipper. Finally, his hair was red and messy and went down to the middle of his back. His skin was pale and blue eyes were dark too. Jukuna was a tactician during the last 2 wars, someone whose intellect was considered on par with the Nara clan. In fact, it was Jukuna who coordinated the defense of the nation against the combined force of Kyumo and IWA during the Second Shinobi World War. Futoji Uzumaki was after him. Futoji was an odd-looking person, as his entire body was covered in bandages to hide terrible scars he endured in the past. His red hair stuck out and was short, barely went past his neck. He wore a black and white kimono over his bandaged body and wore wooden sandals similar to Jiraiya's. Unlike the other members of the council, Futoji did not sit in a chair. Instead, he sat cross-legged on a floating palanquin. Futoji was an expert in the use of all 5 elements, having created his own unique fighting style of utilizing them. He was also the oldest member of the council when Sadahiko was not present. Jishin Uzumaki is the clan's most skilled swordsman, second only to Sadahiko. Though he wielded a bakken that was made entirely out of chakra metal. He was the one to train both Kushina and Hyson in the way of kenjutsu. He wore a gray sleeveless haori over a black jacket, black shirt and black pants. His red hair was tied into an upward ponytail and had 3 scars over his lip, the last 2 going over his eyes, which were closed. Leaning against his side was his bakken, tasho, sword sheath. The second female member was Momo Uzumaki, a master of assassination and poisoning. She was 23 and was an admirer of Kushina Uzumaki, seeing her as an example of what all kunoichi should be. Momo had a tomboyish appearance but was nonetheless stunning. She had red hair like the rest of her clan, tied into 2 pigtails that went down her neck. Her green eyes and tan skin made her face beautiful and at the same time intimidating. She wore a short black and yellow kimono with long sleeves, along with black pants that hugged her legs, which was underneath a long black and yellow skirt. And finally, the last member was Dawn Uzumaki, the youngest member currently on the council. He was chosen due to his social personality and skills with lightning manipulation. He had blue eyes, fair skin and short spiky red hair. He wore a long-sleeved gray-blue vest, with a high collar that covered his entire mouth and the rest of his lower face. The rest of his attire consisted of dark blue shinobi pants and long black sandals. Currently the room had been altered so that all 9 members, and Sadahiko, were sitting around one Jiraiya who was standing in the center of the room, a chakra-suppressing tag on his chest. Not that it would have made a difference if he didn't have one anyway. Sadahiko would have made sure that Jiraiya couldn't leave. Once everyone was settled, Tashi looked at his father, who gave the daimyo a nod before said man looked back at Jiraiya. Jiraiya, Toad Sage and one of the 3 Sanins of Konoha, do you know why you're here? Tashiya asked in a hard tone. Jiraiya hesitated for a moment before responding. I assume it's about me spying on your daughter at the hot springs? Jiraiya asked cheekily only to have everyone glare at him. That is one of them, Tashiya said as he looked at some reports. The others are your relations to Naruto Uzumaki, son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, the latter being your prize student. Jiraiya lowered his head knowing what was coming next as Zangyaku took the stand. According to Kushina-chan, she along with Minato-san asked you to become Naruto-kun's godfather for the name of the main character from your first book, a position you accepted. I assume that you know what the title means and the responsibilities you get by accepting it, correct? Jiraiya just nodded as Tashiya spoke again. So tell me, Jiraiya, where were you during the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha? Jiraiya thought for a moment before responding. Somewhere between the borders of the Fire Country and Earth Country when I got a messenger monkey from Sensei, informing me of what happened. And what did you do once you received the letter? Tashiya asked again. Jiraiya sighed before answering. I headed towards Konoha in order to check the damage done by the attack along with checking on the seal placed on Naruto. I stayed for about a month making sure everything was done to ensure Naruto's safety from Minato's enemies before leaving again to check on my spy network. Momo, who was glaring at Jiraiya all the time, asked, Really? And how does going to the land of hot water to spy on hot springs and go to brothels a way of keeping up with your network? Or are you saying that you even have contacts in those places too? Jiraiya was about to reply back when Dawn spoke. I believe we proved the point that Jiraiya had left Naruto-sama right after checking up on him. I would like to know why we weren't informed about the boy's survival when Kushina-sama told us 3 years ago that her child was reported dead. Look, I had no idea Kushina was even alive, Jiraiya protested. I was told that she died along with Minato. Hell, Sensei even showed me the body. Tashiya rubbed his chin. While I admit that that was in no part your own fault, you still have not told us why we weren't informed of my grandson's survival, or was it because, how did you put it back on the ship? The other 4 great villages have at least 2 Jinchuriki, allowing you to take Naruto would have destroyed the balance between the 5 great nations. I believe that is what you said. And by how you were putting it, you believe that Jinchuriki, past and present, are nothing more than weapons to be used in battle. What? Sadhiko yelled at that. Then he gave a ki-intensified glare at Jiraiya, who was now white as a ghost. Are you saying that my little sister, granddaughter and great-grandson are nothing but weapons? He practically yelled, the room beginning to crack a bit from the chakra that he was letting out. I meant nothing like that, Jiraiya shouted back, though he was still having trouble staying awake from the killing intent directing at him. I merely meant that because the village was still recovering from the Kyuubi's attack and that if word got out that the Jinchuriki had left Konoha, villages like Iwa or Kumo would not hesitate to take the chance of invading us. Furthermore, I think we've heard enough, Tatsu said, cutting off Jiraiya. It is clear to me that this man has no excuse for neglecting his duty as a godfather or telling us of Naruto-sama's existence. Along with that, according from Tashiya-sama had learned from the mind skin seal we placed on the pervert, it is clear that Jiraiya was aware of Naruto-sama's treatment in Konoha. All in all, I say he is guilty of both betraying the clan, Naruto-sama, Kushina-sama and Minato-san's trust. I agree with Tatsu-san, Dawn added, which was soon followed by the rest of the council. The only reason I can see for Jiraiya not being there for Naruto, however, was the pain and grief of losing his prize student, who was almost like a son to him. Though that does still not excuse him from his crime and punishment, which I think we should decide on what said punishment should be. Jiraiya looked at them in shock, but he knew better than to speak. To the Uzumaki clan, betraying a promise to people close to you was the worst crime to be done. I vote we have him executed for betraying our clan, Momo shouted and then added, or at the very least castrate the damn pervert. I think that might be a little too extreme, Momo-chan, Renga commented after looking how pale Jiraiya had turned hearing the other Uzumaki female's suggestion. I think a more suitable punishment should be placed. I vote that we banish Jiraiya from coming to Whirlpool country unless we give him permission to enter. And Kushina-sama should decide if he is allowed to visit Naruto-kun, if she still approves of him being the boy's godfather. Tashiya nodded. I think that sounds like a fair punishment. Anyone else? When none of the other council members commented, Tashiya looked fully at Jiraiya. Jiraiya of Konoha, as daimyo of the Whirlpool country, I hereby banish you from Whirlpool country and any contact with our people outside of the nation. Even if it's of great importance, it shall be up to us if you're allowed to enter the nation, and it will be Kushina-chan's decision if you may have interaction with Naruto-kun. That is final, he said as he slammed his gravel on the table. Yeah. Now get lost, Sadhiko added and formed a ram sign. This caused the seal underneath Jiraiya to glow, and suddenly the Toad Sage was shot through the building and flying over the ocean back to Fire Country. The chakra-suppressing seal had already come off, but that was ignored over Jiraiya's screams. Everyone looked at Sadhiko, who just had a foxy grin on his face. "Ha! I always wanted to do that," the old Uzumaki said, with his grin getting wider, earning sweat drops from the rest of the council. "What?" Sadhiko asked as he looked at the stairs. "Don't worry, he'll land in Konoha, and seeing how he gets beaten by women daily, he'll probably be walking in 3 days or so," the old Uzumaki said dismissively, earning more sweat drops. Whirlpool Daimyo Palace later that evening. Within the Whirlpool Palace, a celebration part was in full swing, all for the arrival of the next heir of the Whirlpool, Naruto Uzumaki. The heads of every single clan of Uzushio along with other important people within the country were in the palace, or outside the palace where a large fair had been set up with people having the time of their lives. The children were running around in their kimonos, doing whatever kids their age did. Surrounding the room as well as other important areas of the palace was the koihai. They all wore the same outfit as Jakuna with the kanji for guard on the back of their haori, and the same light armor around their jacket and pants. They carried swords and spears with seals on the weapons, making them much more devastating. Amaya Uzumaki was with her daughter and several other women near the corner of the large room. Her eyes caught onto her grandson Naruto playing with her granddaughter, Hisen's daughter, Karen Uzumaki. Like her father, Karen had spiky red hair though kept at a shorter length next to her shoulders. Her skin was a bit whiter than Naruto, and she had red eyes and glasses too. She wore a red kimono with purple stripes while Naruto wore a blue kimono with the Uzumaki clan's symbol spread all over it. From what Amaya could tell, the two and several other kids were telling Naruto about what Uzushio is like. "I'm glad that Karen-chan and the other kids are getting along so well with Naruto-chan," Amaya said to Kushina and Karen's mother, Nori Uzumaki. Unlike her husband and daughter, Nori had long straight red hair that went down to her back and most of it was tied in a ponytail. However, she did wear glasses just like her daughter and red eyes. Her skin was tan as well, while her husband's was white, though not milky white like his sister's. She wore a dark/light blue kimono while Kushina wore a red kimono with yellow flowers on it. "Yes, I was worried that Naruto-kun's experience in Konoha might have affected him with interacting with others," Kushina said with a tone that sounded of relief. "I still can't believe that they would do such horrible things to a child," Nori commented. "What doesn't make sense is why Sadhiko-sama didn't flatten the village when he heard what about to Naruto-kun. While his answer to us was because he saw them living with the guilt as a more fitting punishment," Tashi replied while walking up to them. "The real reason is because of his sister, and Mito." "Tashi-kun, where did you come from?" Amaya asked her husband. "I was just speaking with father. He had to leave due to his and Hisen's presents being acquired at the Nishimura compound. I don't know the reason yet, but I'm sure Hisen will inform me when he returns," the daimyo said. The three women just nodded before Kushina asked, "Father, what did you mean that Gigi didn't do it because of Mito-sama?" "As you know, your grandfather loved his younger sister, enough to destroy 2 clans that were threatening her," Tashi said, receiving nods from the women. "Well, Aunt Mito loved Hashirama-sama, and vice versa, which is one of the reasons why they got married. Furthermore, she also loved Konoha too, enough that she decided to remain there even after Hashirama-sama's death." He watched as the others were putting the whole thing together. "So you can see that while Sadhiko probably hates Konoha, he won't destroy it because he could never look at his sister again for destroying a village she loved deeply." Whatever was going to be said next was cut off when a servant entered the room and approached the daimyo, being discreet as possible as to not rouse attention. "Daimyo-sama, a messenger from the Jinrin clan, Silver Lotus, has just arrived. He says it's from Sadhiko-sama, Hisen-sama and Chokusen-sama." Tashi, along with his wife, daughter and daughter-in-law, all glanced at each other, wondering what the message could be about. Uzushio, Jinrin compound. The compound of the noble clan the Jinrin was covered with clansmen and Yuza Anbu, many of them performing seals or having their hands to their weapons. The seals were being used to create a powerful barrier around the main clan dojo where bursts of chakra would appear now and then. The chakra would strike the barrier, causing it to shake a little until it disappeared. Also, if one were to listen carefully, you could hear the sounds of metal clashing, violently too. Near the barrier were 2 men, Hisen Uzumaki and Chokusen Jinrin, the clan's head. Chokusen was a man in his mid to late 30s and had black hair that would reach his shoulders if not tied into a ponytail. He had tan skin and deep black eyes with a scar going down the left cheek. His attire consisted of a grayish-blue short-sleeved shirt with a mesh shirt under it. Along with that, he wore matching shinobi pants and black shinobi sandals with a black belt around his waist that held his sword. Over his clothing he wore an ankle-length black coat with long sleeves and finally fingerless black gloves. Both men watched the dojo intensely and had their hands on their swords, just in case if the worst-case scenario happened. They and everyone else could feel the large chakra as well as inhuman killing intent radiating from the dojo. In fact, some of the shinobi had to step back in order to stay conscious. An hour later, the noise as well as intense power died down, bringing nothing by silence. However, that only brought confusion to the gathered, as they didn't know if this was good or not, but Hyson and Chokusen were not willing to wait any longer. "Drop the barrier," Hyson ordered. The barrier team did so, and once it came down, the Uzukage and clan head walked towards the dojo followed by some of the shinobi. When they reached the door, Hyson looked briefly at Chokusen, who merely nodded. The two slowly entered the dojo to find said place a total wreck, like a war had happened. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered with marks from swords, large cracks and craters caused by the bursts of chakra. And a few places had burnt marks. But in the center of the dojo were two people, one standing and the other lying on the ground. The one on the ground was a young boy, no more than 5 years old. He wore a now torn red kimono, but the boy himself had no injuries. The boy's skin was tan, and he had black hair that went down to his neck. Besides him was a now broken katana, split in two. The man towering over him was none other than Sadhiko Uzumaki. He wore his casual attire, except the right sleeve was gone, and he had a few scratches on his body but nothing serious. In his right hand was a sword, which he held with a firm grip. His hair looked a little out of place, but otherwise he was completely calm, not the least bit tired. His eyes were dark as he looked at the unconscious boy before him. "Gigi," Hyson said as he walked up to his grandfather. Sadhiko just looked at him, and then Chokusen, who was staring at the boy. "Do not fret, Chokusen-san, your son is now okay. I managed to calm him down and place a seal to stop the wild chakra in him," Sadhiko explained. Chokusen Jinra nodded gratefully before rushing to his son's side, picking the boy up carefully. As the other Jin and clan members approached their clan leader, Hyson walked up to Sadhiko, who had a concerned look on his face. "Gigi, that unstable chakra, the killing intent, was that?" "Yes," Sadhiko said, answering Hyson's question. The older man had a serious look on his face, while at the same time remembering a time long ago, and a fierce battle with a woman wielding a sword. "Little Jinsuke Jinren here, his chakra is just like his ancestor, the Jinin clan head of my time, Tanishine Jinren." Hyson swallowed, a nervous look on his usually impassive face as he looked back at the boy, who was being carried by his father to the compound's medical area. "So that means he's..." "Jinsuke Jinren is the second Kijin of the Jinren clan," Sadhiko finished. "And if I'm right, we might have a generation that will surpass mine," the older Uzumaki said with a faint smile forming on his face. "At least 100 years ago. Unknown location." On a stormy and rainy night, a young Sadhiko Uzumaki, wearing light red samurai armor over a blue cloak, ducked in time to avoid having his head chopped off by a scythe. Then he swung his own broadsword and watched as it collided with two dual scythes, wielded by Hachiro, a blue-haired man that wore black demonic armor over a gray cloak. The impact of the two weapons created powerful shockwave that sent much of the surroundings flying backwards, including uprooted trees, pieces of earth, and even the wind itself was thrown back. The blue-haired man was pushed back before doing a back flip and recovering. Using great speed, Hachiro slammed his hands together before a few seconds later extended them. In between them was a spear made out of black energy, and released several small sparks. When he was done, Hachiro threw it, and in mid-air it dispersed, unleashed a powerful barrage of black wind slashes. Seeing the attack coming at him, Sadhiko formed his signature ram seal. Amaya-tan, Hakua no Jutsu. White wall technique. Then a giant clear white wall appeared between Sadhiko and Hachiro's attack. The massive wall managed to hold out against the strong blast of wind, deflecting it to all sides except towards Sadhiko. The deflected attack struck the forest instead, creating numerous explosions with rocks and bits of trees flying into the air. Once the attack died down, the wall broke apart as Sadhiko leaped towards Hachiro, both of them dueling again with their weapons, each clash causing more explosions. Hachiro managed to get an opening and slash Sadhiko's chest after deflecting a sword strike. However, Sadhiko soon turned into smoke, revealing him to be a shadow clone. "Anmaya-tan, Hien Ogura no Jutsu. Ice Flame Blue Wave," a voice shouted. Hachiro looked up and saw Sadhiko taking a deep breath, followed by him letting out a large blue fireball. Hachiro used his dual scythes as a shield, adding black chakra to them, and deflected the attack, not even flinching when there was a large explosion near him and left a giant crater in the ground. When Sadhiko landed on the ground, he formed another ram seal. "Anmaya-tan, Jasho Mashu no Jutsu. Rising Demon Hands technique." Soon multiple large pale arms rose out of the earth towards Hachiro, surrounding him. Though they tried to grab them, Hachiro proved too agile to be caught as he skillfully dodged each and every one of them. A while later, Hachiro managed to jump high enough so that it would take a second for the hands to reach him. "Don't underestimate me," Hachiro shouted as he raised his dual scythes. The weapons soon began glowing, and then Hachiro did swinging movements with them. Both blades unleashed two large waves of black energy the size of a small mountain. The two slashes cut through the giant hands easily as they made their way towards the intended target. Sadhiko dodged the first one, which exploded with the ground behind him, before swinging his broadsword and absorbing the rest of the attack. This left his sword glowing a faint yellow, something that Hachiro did not miss. "Shit!" the blue-haired man yelled to himself as he knew what was going to happen next. "I think this belongs to you, Hachiro," Sadhiko shouted as he swung his blade forward and fired a large beam of yellow energy towards Hachiro. In response, he raised both his hands in front of him and a ripple of energy came out of them, and soon formed a barrier between Hachiro and the oncoming attack. When the two collided, the two were obliterated completely with smoke still rising into the air. However, with the smoke obscuring Sadhiko's view, Hachiro raised his left arm and, forming a gun with his hand with the pointer and middle finger sticking out, fired several beams of black energy towards his opponent. Sadhiko formed the ram seal and murmured, "Anmayatan, Takamama no Jutsu. High Heaven Gate technique," and suddenly a large thick square-shaped white wall popped out of the ground. But Sadhiko wasn't finished as he slammed his right hand at the wall. "Uzumaki Fuin Jutsu, strengthen!" And appearing all over the white wall were black lines, which then gave off a glow as it covered the giant wall, making the whole structure glow too. The moment that the beams struck the wall, they were absorbed by the wall before being released across the battlefield, creating massive explosions with debris flying everywhere due said explosions, leaving craters and large earth fragments sticking out. Sadhiko smirked at his opponent. "You'll have to do better than that, Hachiro, if you want to kill me," the Uzumaki commented. Hachiro smirked, bringing his dual scythes together, where they suddenly formed into one large demonic scythe. "Indeed, though it will be a shame to lose the only person among your kind that offers me a challenge. However, the time for humanity has come to an end, whether or not it's by my hand or even done during this time," he yelled as he raised his large scythe. "Now come, Sadhiko, show me everything you got. Leave nothing out, because if you do you will die," Hachiro cried as he charged forward into the air. As he did, 10 large black-reddish orbs appeared in the air around Hachiro and connected to his dual scythes. Sadhiko growled as he picked up his broadsword, gripping it with his right hand while his left hand formed a hand seal with his eyes closed. A few seconds later, markings of black and white color appeared all over his face as he entered Sage Mode, Yin-Yang style, similar to Hashirama's Wood-style Sage Mode. "Don't act so confident, Hachiro. Because this is the last time we clash, Databeru," he exclaimed, and he soon charged towards Hachiro. "Senpu, Anmayatan, Hashinoken Seishin no Jutsu. Sage Art, Yin-Yang Release, Astral Sword Spirit," and soon chakra came out and surrounded his sword, combined with the natural energy Sadhiko put into the blade, morphing into the shape of a much larger version of it except with a blue glowing blade, giving Sadhiko's sword a longer reach. And when their weapons made contact, the impact created a powerful shockwave that went on for miles and blinded the sky and cut through the heavens. Yuzushio, the Tenzin, present time, morning. An elderly Sadhiko Uzumaki opened his eyes, waking up from his sleep. He found himself in his private studies, a large room that was at the top of the Tenzin. One side was a wall with a door on it, the entrance to his office, and the other side was a wide balcony that served as a viewpoint for him so he could see the ocean and a part of the nation, A/N. Try to imagine it like Yamamoto's office from Bleach, except with more stuff in it. Scanning his room, taking in the numerous pictures, maps, scrolls and books stacked in shelves, tables and even the floor, Sadhiko looked down at his desk and saw that he was reading a notebook about the Rakuta Sennin that he wrote. "Guess I must have drifted off to sleep," Sadhiko thought as he closed the book and slowly got up. "But why did I dream about that battle?" the old Uzumaki asked himself as he placed the book back into the shelf. "That fight was decades ago, but why was I dreaming about it? Could have it had been the words Hachiro said? The time for humanity has come to an end, whether or not it's by my hand or even done during this time." The words still fresh in his mind. These and so many more questions were flowing through Sadhiko's mind when a knock cut him off from his thinking. "Enter," he said without looking towards the door, instead taking out another book that was about a stone called Gale. The door opened and a young woman entered. She was an Uzumaki if the red hair was any indication. It was tied into a ponytail down the back and a white headband underneath her bangs. Her skin was a soft white, and she had black eyes. Her attire consisted of a purple and yellow kimono that went down to her heels. The only odd part was that she wore no footwear, leaving her feet bare. "Sadhiko-sama, Tasha-sama is here to see you. He is waiting in the lounge on the 34th floor," the young woman said. Sadhiko nodded as he put the book back and walked towards the door where the woman was standing. "Thank you, Anoka-chan, I'll head there right now." And with that, both Sadhiko and Anoka made their way towards the lounge. A few minutes later, after taking the chakra seal enhance elevator, they arrived at a wide open lounge, where Tashio was sitting on a chair while a servant served him some tea. Sadhiko noticed that he wasn't wearing the usual daimyo attire, but instead settled for a plain blue kimono, with the clan crest facing the front and most likely the back as well, with a purple sash and a katana resting besides the chair. Now Tashio, don't tell me you stepped down as daimyo already? Is that why you came to see your old man? Sadhiko asked teasingly. Tashio, noticing his father was here, caught on what he was doing and smirked back. I'm not ready yet to give the job to Kushina-chan yet. I just prefer wearing some normal, less uncomfortable clothes while I can. As for my reasons for coming here to see you, it concerns Naruto-kun. Sadhiko had a cup of tea in his hand when he heard this. Why is he still having nightmares? Sadhiko asked his son. The first few weeks since he was reunited with his clan, Naruto had experienced numerous nightmares due to his short time in Konoha. Usually it would result in Naruto sleeping with his mother in order for the boy to be calm and sleep through the night. However, it kept happening for at least 3 months that they had to find some way to help the boy. Though they lacked anyone who had the ability to go into mines like the Yamanaka clan, the Uzumaki clan still had their great skills in Fuinjutsu, including a special type of seal that would allow a person to find out what another person was thinking. Simple enough, they found out that Naruto needed a lot of caring in order to help him get over his trauma in Konoha. No, not that Naruto-kun has stopped having nightmares for a while now, though he still likes to sleep in Kushina-chan's bed, not that she minds. Tashio said as Sadhiko nodded. No, the problem is that somehow, IWA got wind of Naruto-kun's existence as well as him being the son of Minato-kun. Tashio watched as his father groaned in annoyance, and couldn't help but agree with him. I swear I should have killed that idiot Mu and his student Inoki when I had the chance, in order to spare their village of having gaining their misguided permanent grudge persona. I mean, I know that we Uzumaki have the same thing, but at least we don't take it out on kids or run our lives. Sadhiko said while adding in a few curses. Then he looked at his eldest son. I assume Yujin was the one who discovered this piece of information? Tashio nodded. Yes, and he believes that IWA might send this over to Kumo since the current Raikage has no love for the former Yandame Hokage there. Sadhiko scoffed, like I give a damn what Kumo thinks. After what we did to them in response to their attempt of kidnapping Kushina-chan, they won't try anything rash and will mostly do a wait-and-see approach. Tashio nodded in agreement. True, but with the dignitaries coming from Konoha, the council and my court along with the clan and Yuzushio's council are wary that they might try to use the chance to infiltrate the country. That caught Sadhiko by surprise. Konoha is sending representatives here? What for? Do I have to beat the crap out of them again? Tashio scratched his head, like the whole thing annoyed him. Well, originally Kushina-chan wanted to invite some of her friends from Konoha to Naruto's 4th birthday next week since she hasn't seen them for so long. But that soon came to the attention of the Konoha Council and the Fire Daimyo. So now, along with several of her friends and their children, representatives of both Konoha and the Fire Country will be coming to discuss certain matters concerning the re-established alliance between us and Konoha. Tashio explained before getting back up. That was all, father. I had best return to the palace so I can prepare when they come and Naruto's birthday. And with that Tashio bowed to his father, and was escorted out of the tower by a servant. Well, this ought to be interesting, Sadhiko commented as he went back to his studies. Before he left, he turned to a servant that was standing to the side. Make sure to tell Anoka-chan that the tower's security should be up and running by next week. I don't feel like dealing with trespassers when I have to head towards the palace, Sadhiko said, which the response he got was a bow from the servant. He was about to head back to his studies when he froze in mid-step, his eyes widening. Nanny! Naruto's birthday is coming up. Should I got to find him a present? Back in Konoha, Hokage's mansion. Currently the Sandaime Hokage, or rather several clones of him, were currently working on paperwork while the original one was reading his student's latest work, a perverted smile on his face. His days of dealing with the bane of all Kages, paperwork, was now over. Of course, the happy moment was ruined when Danzo Shimura entered the room unannounced. Though Hiruzen had sensed his old rival a few minutes before he came in, so by then his clones had dispersed, and he put his book away. Can I help you with something, Danzo? I would like to discuss with you about letting me be part of the delegates that are to go to Whirlpool country next week, the War Hawk said in his usual monotone voice. Hiruzen sighed. He knew this was going to happen sooner or later. Looking up at his former rival, the Sandaime Hokage said, Danzo, you of all people should know why you weren't included. It's bad enough that we decided it out of nowhere when we found out that several of Kushina's friends would be heading toward Whirlpool Nation. She and Tashio weren't exactly pleased about that, and I don't want to even know what Sadhiko thinks of all this. Sending you would be like shouting a declaration for war, because I know that the only reason that you would want to go to that country is because Naruto-kun is there. Danzo narrowed his eye a bit, and you could have sworn something that sounded near to a growl came from his vocal cords, though it was hard to tell because of his emotionless facade. He contains the Kyuubi within him. He is the property of Konoha, as has all Kyuubi Jinchuriki since the village's founding. I dare you to say that in front of Sadhiko Uzumaki and see what happens. Hiruzen murmured, though loud enough for Danzo to hear. And speaking of Jinchuriki, need I remind you that all past Jinchuriki along with the current one have all been Uzumaki. Mito-sama moved to Konoha because she loved Hashirama-sama and left with her older brother's blessings, who at the time was the Uzumaki clan head. Kushina-chan came to Konoha because Yuzushio was dealing with several fronts, and it would have been impossible for Mito-sama to leave Konoha in her current condition, and that she could have been targeted. The reasons why she didn't go back to Yuzushio is because her home nation was still under pressure, and that she had grown a connection to Konoha and several people within it. And it was a clear sign that the villagers had little love for Naruto-kun, and since his mother was still alive, she had the right to take him with her. And what about the 4 other great villages? They all have Jinchuriki of their own, and with Takigakure being the only minor village with their own. What are the chances that with this change of power that the 4 formers trying to destroy us in our weakened state, or with the latter trying to take our spot as a major village? Because of your cowardice in facing against the Whirlpool nation, you leave Konoha in a vulnerable state. Danzo argued, hoping to use Hiruzen's care for the village's safety and survival as a means of convincing the Sandaime Hokage that they should take action of retrieving Naruto and bringing him back to the village. As Hokage, it's your duty to. Danzo didn't get a chance to finish that sentence as the room and himself was struck by a wave of chakra and killing intent, the source being Hiruzen himself. And despite his years as a shinobi and being a master of hiding his emotions, Danzo could not help but subconsciously cower at the force directed at him, with his skin turning slightly white. Don't you dare tell me how to do my duty, Danzo! Hiruzen roared as a menacing figure seemed to form from the elder Hokage's shadow behind said man. The figure appeared to be glaring down at Danzo as if it was passing judgment of some sort. But it was the eyes of the Sandaime Hokage that caught Danzo's attention. They were no longer filled with the soothing, gentle grandfatherly presence that many in Konoha had come to know. No, now they were nothing more than an intense pillar of fire, a powerful inferno that could reduce armies to ashes. Danzo realized that right now he was in the presence of the professor, the man that could strike fear into the hearts of even seasoned veterans and unleash fury equal to a bijou. Even before Sensei picked me as his successor, I knew the duties of the Hokage. Hiruzen started as his killing intent went down, but was still there nevertheless. I have led this village through the remainder of the First Great Shinobi World War all the way up to the Third War. I will not deny that I have made mistakes now and then, but I am only human, such as all Kages in the other villages as well as my predecessors. Then the killing intent disappeared completely, though small traces of it remained. Nonetheless, Danzo's skin color returned to normal, but that was ignored as Hiruzen kept talking. After Sadhiko-sama's visit, I realized that I've allowed my age to be an excuse for the corruption happening in Konoha, and I intend to rectify that before I retire or die, which means I shall be keeping an eye on a few people, including you, Danzo. Hiruzen said the last part while sending an intimidating glare towards his old rival. The Hokage always had a feeling that Danzo hadn't disbanded route like Hiruzen had ordered, and upon learning that Kushina was tricked into believing that her son was dead, left little doubt on who was responsible. Silence took over in the room as the 2 old rivals merely stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, it was Hiruzen who broke the silence. Your request to join the party going to Whirlpool Nation is denied, now leave. Danzo looked at the elder Hokage for a minute longer with his lone eye before leaving without a single word uttered. The war hawk knew that trying to push the case was now both useless and suicidal, with Hiruzen reverting back into his old persona. However, I still must find a way of getting ears into this meeting with the Whirlpool, without Hiruzen knowing about it. Danzo thought, various plans forming within his head. In the Whirlpool Daimyo's palace, a week later. Currently soon to be 4 years old, Naruto Uzumaki was slowly awakening from his slumber. Naruto's room was a large room, with his 2-person bed in the center of the right side of the room. The blanket that covered his small body was yellow with fishes of different sizes and colors on it. The room itself was painted orange with pictures of various baby animals painted on it in a certain pattern. The rest of the room was covered with multiple shelves filled with children's books and various toys for a boy of Naruto's age. Other items included a small sofa, boxes also filled with toys, a chair that Naruto's mother would sit on with him on her lap when Kushina was reading him a story. There was also a closet at the left corner filled with clothing for the young Uzumaki. Finally, 2 windows were placed on the wall on the right side of Naruto's bed, showing the new morning of the Whirlpool country. Naruto's eyes slowly opened, and the first thing he saw was his beloved teddy bear, his first birthday gift, which he had gotten from his short time in Konoha. He had it only for a year, since he had gotten it on his 3rd birthday. It had brown fur with green eyes and light tan-furred paws, nose and belly. According to the Sandaime, it had belonged to Naruto's mother, which was later confirmed by said woman. That, along with it being Naruto's first birthday present, made the young boy cherish the toy with great reverie. Also, it was Naruto's most guarded object during the next few months. The reason was because the night right after he got the toy, he nearly lost it. It was in the middle of the night, and Naruto was asleep with the bear held tightly around his arms and rubbed against his body. An unknown amount of time later, Naruto felt the lack of fur against his body, causing him to wake up. The result was him being in his small room in the orphanage without his teddy bear, and the door slightly open. Fearing the worst, Naruto peeked out of his room and saw the orphanage lady marching away with the stuffed animal in her hand, with said woman occasionally striking it violently against the wall. With the stealth the 3-year-old Naruto at the time could muster, he followed the matron, fearing the worst for his prized possessions such as being thrown in the fireplace. But heavens were smiling down on the young blonde. The matron at the time was both drunk and tired and, after beating the toy several more times, threw it into the kitchen trash can before heading towards bed. Whether or not this was her intended goal or not, Naruto did not know, but was glad that it was this, then having the toy thrown into the fireplace to be burned. So moving swiftly, Naruto rescued his teddy bear from the trash can and dashed back to his room, shutting the door and locking it. Once he did that, Naruto jumped into bed, covered himself and the toy completely with his blanket, and cried softly as he held it close to him. True, the toy was slightly damaged after the beating it had been given by the matron, its fur tangled and messy, 3 tears in it with the cotton sticking out, and one of its green eyes limping out of the socket. But Naruto could care less about that, and was just happy he didn't lose it. He had been lucky that at least one of the employees at the orphanage, a young woman who was in her late teens, early 20s, who did not have irrational hatred towards the young Uzumaki, was working the next day. Naruto secretly managed to have her wash the teddy bear and then fix it to the best of her abilities, since the young woman wasn't an expert in sewing. But she managed to reattach the eye and close the rips on the toy so they wouldn't reopen unless being swung around violently, and Naruto was eternally grateful to her. For the next few months, Naruto never took the teddy bear with him when outside of his room, for fear of losing it for good this time. However, he also had to keep it hidden within his room so it could never be found. Naruto managed to do this when he found a loose wooden board on the floor of his bedroom underneath his bed. It was big enough for him to hide his teddy bear in, and deep within the bottom of the bed that only someone of his size could get to. He had been unable to get it when the matron suddenly threw him out on that fateful day. And it would have been left behind if Kushina hadn't paid the matron lady a little visit during her quest to punish all those who had mistreated her son. After speaking with the matron, Kushina went to her son's former room to see if there was anything of his that needed to be collected. Following some strange intuition, Kushina had moved the bed and discovered the teddy bear's hiding spot. And so a week or so later, after their return to Whirlpool Nation, Kushina had fixed the toy up completely and returned it to an overjoyed Naruto. Now he sleeps with it every night without worrying of losing it ever again. A knock at his door woke him up from his thoughts. "Naruto-chan? Are you awake, sweetie?" A familiar feminine voice asked on the other side of the door. Naruto smiled upon hearing the voice. "Mommy." "Oof," Naruto said as he shot up the bed to run towards his mother. However, doing so got him accidentally caught within his blanket, and the sudden restraint caused Naruto to fall out of his bed and landed on the floor with a thud. Kushina immediately came in when she heard the noise and soon found herself looking at a mummified little Naruto. The yellow blanket was now completely wrapped around the boy's body with only his eyes not covered and his arms sticking out. But this obvious thing did not make a connection with Naruto, as his only thoughts were reaching his mother, and thus ran towards her. Kushina found it cute and bent down to get a hold of her son. "Careful, Naruto-chan, you don't want to fall again, especially on the morning of your birthday," Kushina said softly as she helped her son get untangled from the blanket. And though she had been trying to calm Naruto down, something that is almost impossible for a person with Uzumaki blood, so he could get free of the blanket, the mention of his birthday seemed to have made Naruto even more excited as he was squirming in his mother grip. A birthday, his first real birthday, with cake, gifts, friends, and so many other things he had seen other children back in Konoha have. "Will Hijiji, Uncle Kane, and Uncle Hisen's family be there, Mommy?" Naruto asked as he finally calmed down so his mother could help him get dressed. Kane Uzumaki was the younger brother of Hisen and Kushina, thus making him the third child and second son of Toshio and Amaya Uzumaki, and finally Naruto's uncle. He was one of Uzushio's best ANBU captains at the age of 15 and was currently the commander of the village's special ANBU unit, the Iryu. Now, before you think he got there through his connections, then think again, as Kane worked hard for that position, as is the unofficial law of the Uzumaki clan. You don't earn something just because of who you're related to or something you possess. You earn it through hard work, and that is what Kane did. He was a prodigy, don't tell him that, since he hated the word, and believed to be almost as good as other famous prodigies such as Minato Namikaze and Kakashi Hatake. In fact, he became an S-rank shinobi at the age of 12 and 2 years later earned the name Shinkanoa Kidori, Crimson Wrath, due to his hot temper and his spiky red hair. Kane hadn't been able to come to Konoha because Hyson had him stay in charge of Uzushio. But he did get a chance to meet his nephew during the party in honor of Naruto's arrival. Naruto instantly came to like his second uncle as he was a bit more loose than Hyson and still had a penchant for doing pranks. Though nowadays he merely did humorous jokes since he did have a duty as the commander of the Iryu. Kane was also given the honor of wielding one of the clan's famous swords, the Tsurugiya, sword wings, a broadsword with unique seals. They're just taking care of a few things and then they'll be over soon, Kushina said as she finally managed to get a blue kimono with the clan's crest on the back onto Naruto's form. And don't forget that Sadhiko Jiji is old, so it might take him some time to get here, Kushina added with a foxy grin while Naruto giggled at the joke. Elsewhere within the Tenzin, said Elder Uzumaki sneezed as he finished looking over Naruto's present. Damn, someone's talking about me. Hope it doesn't last through the day or Anoka-chan will make me stay in the tower, Sadhiko muttered to himself before returning to his original task. Near the port of Whirlpool country that point towards Fire country, the morning of Naruto's birthday. At the same time, a small convoy of carriages, with several samurai groups around it, could be seen heading away from the port on the road towards the palace. Within the carriages were the visitors from Konoha and Fire country. This group included the older friends of Kushina Uzumaki, which were Mikoto Uchiha and Hitomi Hyuga along with their children Itachi Uchiha, Sasuke Uchiha, and Hinata Hyuga. The others were Koharu Yudatane and Hamura Mitokado, the two elders of Konoha and Hiruzen's former teammates, Shikaku Nara the Jonin commander, Shibi Aburame, the Aburame clan head and whose logical input of life would be useful for the talks. And finally there was Asuma Sarutobi, the son of Hiruzen Sarutobi and a member of the Guardian 12 who protected the Fire Daimyo, and thus was representing the Fire Nation. Within their carriage, Hitomi was explaining to Hinata what to expect when reaching the Whirlpool Palace and Uzushio. You see, Hinata-chan Shodame Uzukage as well as the daimyo of Whirlpool, Sadhiko Uzumaki, decided that the best way for the palace and village to exist was that if they were merged together. And so with that in mind, Sadhiko created the blueprints for this idea on his own. What he did, you see, was that he created 3 layers of walls, the outer wall that was around the village similar to the wall back at Konoha. The second wall was built between the village and the palace, though mainly it was built at the edge inside the village where a round form of water separated the rest of the country from the island that the palace resided on, acting as the first line of defense to the palace. And the last third wall was built around the edge of the island itself to defend the palace, which acted as the final line of defense. A/N. Imagine it like Suriidii from Bleach, though with some slight differences, like instead of a mountain in the center there is an island. But why would Sadhiko-sama do that, mommy? Hinata asked, confused of why such a thing to be done. I think it's so that they can show that the nation's ruler and the village's ruler can work together. Because despite the fact that both are related to one another, they might have differences such as all people do, Hitomi said before adding, also so that way the two powers of this nation can be at the same place and protect one another. Even though you're little, Hinata-chan, it will be good to remember this, as all nations and their villages have different policies. Hinata merely nodded before looking out the carriage's window and saw that they were nearing one of the gates to Uzushio. When they passed through, Hinata was in awe of what she saw and couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of Uzushio. While similar to Konoha building appearance-wise, there were several differences that could be easily pointed out. One was that unlike Konoha there were fewer trees, though you could see some on each block. Along with that, Uzushio had more small rivers going through the village towards the ocean or the circle of water that separated it from the palace. And of course all the rivers had bridges built over them. Many of the rivers were mostly concentrated within the village's public park, and they usually merged with the larger ones heading towards the center of the village, which her eyes spotted something and she realized that it was probably the Uzukage's tower. It was similar to the Hokage's tower except that it had 4 pillars around it on all corners and had what looked like a large umbrella over the roof, probably in case it rained or something, and it almost looked retractable too. Even the Uzukage's tower was surrounded by a small moat with mini whirlpools within said moat. And, as said before, the village's buildings looked just like the ones in Konoha. There were several differences. Besides that, none of the buildings were built next to or attached to trees. The buildings in Uzushio were mostly made out of stones/metal rather than wood/stones/metal in Konoha. Many of the buildings appeared to look more futuristic, with some of the fancier ones having separate floors connected via pillars with stairs either sticking outside or being hidden by walls. The colors of many of the buildings were either orange, blue, gray, red or yellow, with a small number having different colors, though even those buildings barely stuck out from the others. The last 2 bits of features were the pillars near the rivers and the statue out in the distance. On both sides of every river, with being a block apart, were large orange pillars with the Uzumaki clan symbol engraved into them, and they were all connected by metal fences in order to prevent people from accidentally falling into the rivers. On the opposite side of the Uzukage Tower was a large mountain, equal in size with the wall it rested on. It was called Mountain of Legacies according to Hitomi. It was similar to the Hokage's monument, with that at the top of the mountain the heads of the past and current Uzukage's faces were carved large enough for the whole village to see. Hisen's face was also up there too, along with his predecessors, the head before him being his uncle Jakuna Uzumaki, the Sandame Uzukage. After that was Hisen's father Tashi Uzumaki, the Nidame Uzukage, who took the position when his father, Sadhiko Uzumaki, stepped down from the position as Shodame Uzukage in order to wander the world and later settle down in the Tenzin. Of course, that meant Tashi became the daimyo while Jakuna became the Sandame Uzukage. Later on, he stepped down from office near the end of the Third Shinobi War and made Hisen his successor. According to Hinata's mother, however, unlike the Hokage monument at the bottom of the mountain is what gave said rock formation's name to legacies, for at the bottom was a well-built large memorial site with the names of not just famous Uzushio shinobi, but many other shinobi of the village who fought and gave their lives for their village, home, and their loved ones. It was constructed per Sadahiko's request after the First Great Shinobi World War, in a way to honor and remember the men and women who died for the village and nation, as well as for their loved ones to have a place to pay their respects. Hinata's musings were cut off when the carriage suddenly came to a halt. She concluded that they arrived because the carriage's door opened, revealing it to be what she assumed was a guard, since her mother told her that the Whirlpool daimyo's guards wore red haori over the rest of their armor. As they walked off, Hinata and the others noticed that the guards had formed two lines with a space in the center for them, the guests, to walk through. There was also a man in the center of the two lines, and while he wore the same outfit as the other members of the Koihai, his haori, however, was missing its sleeves, along with the jacket underneath, thus revealing his well-built dark skin arms, while his hands were covered by white bandages wrapped around them, and his arms along with fingerless black gloves. He wore a silver visor over his eyes, and his black hair was pulled down into dreadlocks that went past his neck. Another piece to take notice was that strapped to his waist by a white belt that also held his haori was a sword with a teardrop-shaped tsuba, while the handle was wrapped in orange. "Greetings," he said to the Konoha group. His voice was deep and carried authority. "My name is Kename Jinren, head of the Koihai 9th Squad. I've been assigned to escort you all to the throne room where his lordship and family shall be waiting. Also, please do not wander off anywhere until we reach said destination, as such an act will force us to detain you," he said as he turned around, with some of his men following while the rest only moved once the Konoha group moved, thus putting said group in the middle. During the walk, the adults kept looking forward, though they did now and then steal glances at their surroundings, taking in the designs of the palace. While Sasuke and Hinata, because of their childlike curiosity, had their heads swinging side to side, looks of fascination in their eyes as they took in their new surrounding. Even Sasuke's older brother, the stoic Itachi Uchiha, would have a look of interest now and then. A few minutes later, the group arrived at their destination, which the door to the throne room was huge, colored red with various seals on them, most likely security measures. On the doors were two large people, one on each door, with different characteristics, and their hands stretched out to the center where the doors meet. There their hands made contact, while at the same time they looked like they were holding some kind of orb. But that was nothing compared to the throne room itself. When they entered the throne room, the group of Konoha gasped in awe. It was a large room, large enough for a small clan to fit in. Surrounding the room near the edges were pillars with not just the Uzumaki crest, but what appeared to be pictures of people doing various things. A guard was standing in front of each pillar with their sword sheath and a spear in their right hands. If they noticed the newcomers, they did not show it. The windows were covered with stained glass showing different kinds of pictures, like telling a story of some kind. Hanging near where the walls and ceiling meet were banners of different colors with various symbols on each banner, not just the Uzumaki clan crest. And to the opposite of them was a giant picture on the wall of a man who wore what appeared to be a cloak with his arms spread out and his legs crossed over one another. In the right hand was a monk's staff, while in the left was a katana, while surrounding him were 6 black and red dots. He had long spiky white hair and what appeared to be a pair of horns sticking out of his forehead. And the only thing on his face were his eyes, which, to the surprise of those who recognized the swirling pattern in the eyes, were the Rinnegan, thus meaning that it was a picture of the clan's grandfather Hamura Otsutsuki. Above him was another figure, though slightly smaller, and had spiky red hair that reached his shoulders. This was clearly Murugan, the founder of the Uzumaki clan and one of Hamura's 2 sons. He wore a similar cloak to his father, and wielded a sword in one hand and a staff in the other, but he also had a large scroll strapped to his back. Surrounding the two were small-made pictures of people lined up in several rows. In front of the wall were several fancy chairs fit for those of royalty. The one in the center was placed on top of a small podium with 3 steps before it, and sitting on it was Tashi Uzumaki, the Whirlpool daimyo. To his left, sitting on a lower podium, was his wife Amaya Uzumaki, and to his right was his daughter and heir Kushina Uzumaki, with her son Naruto Uzumaki sitting on her lap. Standing next Tashi's right, in between the man and his wife, was their son Hisen Uzumaki, while Tashi's younger brother, and head of the Koihai, Jakuna Uzumaki, was stand at the far left next to his sister-in-law Amaya. As the group from Konoha walked forward and bowed before the daimyo, Tashiya stood up and said with a booming voice, "Welcome visitors. As daimyo of the Whirlpool country, I, Tashi Uzumaki, welcome you all." Whirlpool Palace. 2 hours after arriving to the palace, Tashiya had several servants escort the guests from Konoha to their rooms. Hayashi's family got their own room with a divider and a bed on both sides of it, with the larger bed for the parents, and the same for Mikoto and her sons, except they had 3 beds but a divider. The others all got their own rooms, though not as big as they were made for just 1 or 2 people. Before they left, Tashiya warned/remind them that Koihai and Yuzunin would escort them during their stay in the palace. Along with that, they would need to come to him to gain permission to leave the palace as well to explore the village. The message seemed to be more directed towards the 2 elders since he did not fully trust them. Currently, since the celebration wouldn't begin until later on during dinner, all of the guests, minus the elders, were in one of the lounges that had access to the outdoor garden. Kushina, Nori, Mikoto and Hitomi, the latter holding her second child Hanabi who had fallen asleep, were sitting on a bench in the garden catching up with each other. Shikaku had decided to lie on a chair in the shade and took a nap, typical Nara. Shibi was admiring the wildlife and keeping an eye out for any interesting new bug specimens. Hayashi was talking with Asuma and Hyson, who had just arrived with his family, about several things related to their nations and villages. And finally the children were playing with Kane, who had arrived with Hyson's family. Currently Hinata and Karen were watching as Naruto, Sasuke and, somehow getting dragged in, Itachi play wrestling with Kane. Kane was around the same age as people such as Asuma, Kakashi, Kurenai and Guy, just entering his 20s. His skin color was about the same color as his older siblings, but had more of a tan to it too. Like his brother Hyson, Kane's red hair was spiky too, but not as long as Hyson's or Kushina's, and was somewhat in a similar fashion as Naruto's, except he had a small ponytail going down to the bottom of his neck, and one of his bangs was in front of his face. His eyes were a dark purple color that they almost looked black. He wasn't wearing his Iria ANBU attire, now wearing a more casual choice of clothing that consisted of an unzipped long-sleeve black jacket over a black shirt with a blue-colored version of the clan's symbol, black fingerless gloves, dark green pants and blue sandals. Wrapped around his head covering the front of his hair was a black bandana version of a shinobi headband, the metal plating on the bandana with the village's symbol too. "You know, Kushina-chan, there's been one thing that's been bothering me," Mikoto said to her friend, who was out of her formal princess wear and wearing a simple red kimono with blue trims on it. "If Hyson-san is older than you, then how did you get to become Tashiya-sama's heir?" the Uchiha woman asked. Mizan didn't really think that he was daimyo material and felt more content in just remaining as Yuzukage and then retiring when he found a successor. Kushina said while taking a quick glance at the children. "Also, given his reputation and the fact he's the strongest shinobi of Yuzusho minus father and Gigi, but since those two are no longer registered as shinobi, it would have been a waste to have Hyson to become daimyo when he could serve better as Yuzukage. So I was chosen as the next daimyo after my father. Also because my father realized that I have better patience and understanding of politics than my brothers," Kushina said as she puffed her chest out at the last part. Her friend's sweat dropped at the last remark. Kushina-chan, I don't know about politics, but patience? Really? You're the most impatient person I've ever met," Hitomi said. She and Mikoto giggled at the pout and glare Kushina was giving. "I have to agree with them, Kushina. In fact, I think Hyson-kun has more patience than the rest of the clan," Nori said, adding her 2 cents. "While I admit that Hyson-Nizan is more level-headed than the rest of my family, he's a devil when he gets enraged," Kushina said to her friends and sister-in-law with a shudder. "I remember as children that it was almost impossible for me or Kane to beat Hyson at anything when he's mad or even when he's calm. And whenever he got mad, the only people that could calm him down back then and even now were my parents and Gigi." And speaking with Kane, said young man was walking up towards the mothers with Karen, Hinata and Itachi in tow, while Sasuke and Naruto were still held underneath his arms, their behinds facing the older women. "Hey sis, I'm going to head towards the Tenzin to check on Gramps. Mind if I take the runts with me?" Kushina looked at the children and, seeing an excited look in Karen and Naruto's eyes, who had been put back down on the ground along with Sasuke, and the curious looks in said boy and Hinata's. Even Itachi seemed to want to go there. Kushina sighed. "Well, I'm fine with it, just remember to behave, Naruto-kun," Kushina said to her son, who nodded excitedly. "You too, Karen-chan," Nori said to her child, said girl, giving a similar response as Naruto with a headshake. Mikoto and Hitomi also approved as well, and after reminding their children to be on their best behavior, Kane began to lead them out. However, he stopped when Kushina spoke up. "Hey Kane, do you know where Tu-san and Ka-san went off to?" "I think they had to head towards the meeting room," Kane responded. "Something about those 2 prunes wanting to speak with them regarding Tsunade." And with that he walked off, trying to catch up with the kids. Whirlpool Daimyo Palace, Council Room. I would have preferred to wait for Tsunade-chan to arrive since this discussion is about her, Tashiya said to the two elders as his wife sat beside him. Hamaru and Koharu were sitting on the opposite side of the table, facing the Whirlpool daimyo with emotionless looks on their faces. We believe that it would be better to talk about this while Tsunade was not present due to her obvious reaction to the topic of this discussion, and things might go south pretty quick, Koharu said, making a reference to Tsunade's temper and legendary strength. Tashiya and Amaya both knew what the woman meant, but it was Tashiya who responded. You do know that I'm stronger than her, right? And that I can keep her calm down? Tashiya asked nonchalantly. The two elders glanced at one another before looking at Tashiya. Yes, Tashiya-sama, we have not forgotten your strength with Shintai, God Body. Due to the fact that the Uzumaki clan had long lives, great vitality and life force, the clan members were able to use this to their advantage. And it came in the form of a technique they created over 900 years ago called Shintai, a technique in which they sent chakra within their body through their bloodstream. Anyone else other than an Uzumaki would die from such an attempt because the chakra would make their blood cells explode. But for the Uzumaki clan, it increased their physical offensive and defensive capabilities so that even having a sword hitting their necks would only leave no wounds or at the very least a shallow cut. If they were able to control it better, with beginners able to send it to certain parts of their bodies while a master could send it throughout their entire body at once. And as a bonus, the flow of chakra through their bloodstreams also increased their already superhuman healing abilities and could even terminate foreign invaders such as poison and even repel the gentle fist of the Hyuga clan. This technique gave birth to what later became the clan's fighting style called Heido, wave motion, which allowed the user to enhance their physical prowess and release shockwaves for melee and range attacks. The only drawback of this technique is that the user couldn't use ninjutsu. The reason is because since ninjutsu usually requires the user to expel chakra from their bodies, it could cause damage to their bodies if they tried to release chakra from their bloodstream. But on the bright side, the Uzumaki clan managed to use this technique and imbued it with any weapons they had in their hands at times, since its Shintai was in some way the same as using chakra flow, the ability to send chakra through weapons to increase the weapon's efficiency. They also were able to combine seals with the Shinken, and a few members were even able to combine their nature affinities with Shintai, labeling the technique as an intaijutsu in a way. A notable member was none other than Tashi Uzumaki. While his younger brother, Chikuna, was able to imbue his weapons such as his dual dao swords or for his cloak techniques while using his unique Shadow Shunshin, which is how he earned the moniker the Shinken no Borai, Tashi was able to use his natural affinity of fire chakra with his Heido techniques. Combined with the fact that Tashi's Shintai was the strongest in the clan's history, earned him the title of Akakazi no Tenshin, since his extraordinary strong Shintai and Heido combined with his wind chakra and solidification of the air, left deep marks on his opponents and even the surrounding area. This was proven when Tashi killed the Sandame Reikage, a man whose legendary durable body gave him the title Saikyo no Tate, in retaliation for when Kumo tried to kidnap Tashi's daughter Kushina when she was still in Konoha as a newly made genin. Of course, Kumogakure then held a grudge towards Yuzushio for the Sandame Reikage's death, along with when Sadhiko, in response to the failed attempt on his granddaughter, killed the lightning daimyo at the time, since the daimyo was in on the plan, and the Jinchuriki of the Nibi at that time too. But neither men gave a damn since they, Kumo, brought that on themselves for trying to kidnap a family member. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. You mentioned something about Tsunade-chan. Amaya said, trying to finish up this conversation so she could get back to more important things, getting things ready for Naruto's birthday party. Hamura pushed up his glasses before replying. Yes, recent developments have made us, the Konoha Council as well as the Fire Daimyo, choose several candidates to become the Godame Hokage. One of which is Tsunade Senju, and thus if the need arise when Hiruzen is ready to retire or worse, she will be forced to return to Konoha and take up her sensei's duties. Tashiya raised an eyebrow. While I can understand Hiruzen's decision, need I remind you that Tsunade-chan left Konoha, and thus is not entitled to obey the words of the Hokage? Not entirely, Koharu responded. She was allowed to live here because of her Sannin status giving her permission to travel the country, and the fact she has a third of Uzumaki blood, as long as she did not give away any information on Konoha. Taking the belongings of the Senju clan was in her right as the current clan head and its only known member. However, she wasn't allowed to resign from being a Konoha shinobi, and such if she is called for to perform her duty for the village she must answer, such as becoming the Godame Hokage. The woman finished. Tashiya frowned at this but expected it nonetheless. It was true Tsunade had merely been helping out now and then at Yuzushio's hospital, but really she and Shizen had been staying at the Tenzin as tenants, meaning no gambling for her unless she wanted a pissed-off Sadhiko on her tail, wanting to kick out the gambling habit she inherited from her grandfather. Also, despite his compassion, Hiruzen knew that losing someone as skilled as Tsunade was something he couldn't allow as the Hokage of Konoha. Tsunade's skills as a medic were second to none besides Hashirama Senju, who could use medical jutsu without hand seals. While I admit that you make good points, you do know that there is little chances that she'll agree to it. Amaya said, adding her own 2 cents in. If she refuses the summons for duty, then she will be labeled as a missing Nin despite her residence here in Whirlpool country, Koharu said staunchly. What? You're going to do something so extreme just to get a single shinobi back? Amaya shouted before Tashi put his hand on his wife's shoulder to calm her down. The daimyo then stared at the two elders. I suggest we wait for Tsunade-chan to arrive because I know she won't like having decisions made for her without her own input. And though I'll have to agree to these demands since she is still registered as shinobi of Konoha, she should at least be here to know it. Koharu and Hamura murmured to one another before turning back to face Tashi. That is a reasonable demand, Hamura said. However, it will be you two who will inform her about it, Tashi said with a small smirk on his face when he noticed when both elders twitched at that. With Kane's group, the Tenzin. Well, here it is, Kane said as the visitors from Konoha all had their mouths opened and their eyes widened in shock and awe at the sight before them. The Tenzin was built in one of the more isolated parts of Uzushio and mainly consisted of a large tower with a height of over 500 feet and was surrounded by a large round stone wall that was about 2.5 miles apart from the tower, with the fields within the walls being filled with trees, bushes, and other plants. There was only a single entrance through the walls, which were about half the size of the ones guarding the village and were covered by numerous seals. It's so big!" Sasuke exclaimed as he gazed up at the tower. Hinata looked a bit intimidated by the large tower and hid behind her bodyguard Kohyuga, who had accompanied the group per Hayashi's request. Itachi showed no signs of shock except for his eyes being a little wider. To Ko and Itachi, the tower was almost the same size as the Kyuubi was 4 years ago, since they were old enough to remember that time. Yep, and along with the Uzukage's mansion and the daimyo's palace, it's one of the most protected places in the nation, with all the personnel, seals and barriers placed all around it and the wall, Kane said with a smirk as he looked at the faces on the Konoha guests. Deciding that they had gazed at it long enough, Kane led them forward, Naruto and Karen right behind and slowly followed by the others. After a brief interaction with the gate guards to prove their identities, the group walked across the only road towards the tower's front door, which was at the end of a long staircase going upwards. Once Kane's group reached the door, said man rung the doorbell several times, releasing a deep ringing noise. A few seconds later a voice came out of the speaker. "Hello?" The voice of Sadhiko asked. "Hey Gigi, it's me," Kane said casually to the speaker. "I brought Naruto and Karen with me, along with some of the visitors from Konoha," Kane replied. There was silence before Sadhiko replied, "It isn't those two brats Koharu and Hamura, is it?" the elder Uzumaki asked. The people from Konoha's sweat dropped at that. He called the elders brats? Was the thought running through their minds? Though it made sense if you thought about it. Since Sadhiko was in his hundreds and the elders along with the Sandaime Hokage were in their 60s, then the former would be older than the latter by about 40 years. That would effectively make Hiruzen, Koharu, Hamaru and Danzo brats in the eyes of Sadhiko, though it was still hard for the Konoha people to grasp. Their thoughts were cut off as the large door slowly opened, when Kane told Sadhiko Koharu and Hamaru were not part of the group, allowing them to enter. An hour later, after a few introductions, the group had split up to explore parts of the tower they were allowed to go, while some Yuza A and B were watching over them from the shadows. The group had also been told that Tsunade had already left towards the palace and they must have passed by her, much to the disappointment of Naruto and Karen, but Yujin's presence made up for it since the 1,000-year-old being was doing a good job of entertaining the guests with his special ability, molecular manipulation, which allowed him to do things with his body like inflating his head like a balloon. Much to the amusement of the children. Currently Naruto, Sasuke and Karen were playing tag under the watchful eye of Anoka. Hinata decided to walk through the garden around the tower with Ko accompanying her, as well as several hidden A and B watching them. Kane finally had decided to take a nap since there was nothing better to do. And Itachi was discovered by Sadhiko to be in one of the many libraries of the tower, reading books after books from what the elder Sadhiko could see. Interesting, Sadhiko mused to himself as he watched the young Uchiha, and didn't disturb him. Sadhiko had rarely seen Uchiha members take an interest in anything that didn't revolve around their clan or didn't give them an advantage in battle, since they always shut themselves off from others because of their sensitive emotions. Sadhiko knew that Uchiha valued love more than the Senju clan, since it was emotions that affected the awakening of the Sharingan and the Mangekyo Sharingan. He had discovered it long ago from his studies as well as his interaction with Uchiha members, Madara especially. His Uchiha student had loved his brothers and clan dearly, which is what mostly drove Madara to despise the Senju, Hashirama and Konoha. It was the fact that his brothers were dead and that his own clan didn't trust him, which caused Madara to turn to darkness. Still, Sadhiko was curious that Itachi seemed more interested in things outside his clan and did not seem bound to the curse of hatred. There were only a few Uchiha in history that didn't succumb to that curse, and it looked like Itachi was one of them. With Itachi, the young Uchiha was awed from what he was reading. He had always been more curious about the history of his home village Konoha, and not restricted to his clan's ways. But he was also very curious about Konoha's sibling village, Uzushio, especially when he heard of how much they valued knowledge. And the fact that supposedly that Sadhiko Uzumaki, a person who lived during the age before villages even existed, was alive and had collected over his years of travel. And when his mother said he was going to take Sasuke and him to Whirlpool country, Itachi had been very excited, though he hid it well. It wasn't that he wanted knowledge for power, he wanted knowledge to know and understand to help him in his life and not restrict him to things such as the ways of the Uchiha clan. Right now what he was reading was information based off of the Rikudo Sannin and Himura Otsutsuki, and how together they both saved the world from a monster called the Jubi, the original Biju, and later on taught the world of chakra and brought birth to Ninshu before it was perverted and gave life to the ninja world. It later spoke of how he and his wife had 2 children, each one inheriting something from the sage. This part really caught Itachi's attention because he knew that the eldest son was the ancestor of the Uchiha clan. The eldest, Indra, had inherited his father's eyes, large chakra and spiritual energy. The middle son and Senju ancestor, Azura, had inherited the sage's body, life force and physical energy. Himura was a similar case, as his 2 sons inherited something from him too. The eldest Murugan inherited his father's incredible chakra reserves, mental energy and physical energy, as well as gaining incredible life force and different chakra natures and shape manipulation. The youngest Surya, founder of the Hyuga clan, inherited his father's eyes along with the ability to have enhanced visual perception, physical energy, spiritual energy, along with being able to have perfect chakra control and immense instincts. Since he was born with his father's blood, Murugan also had high chakra reserves, which passed down through his clan. Combined with their more enhanced natural instincts and mental energy, the Uzumaki clan were able to become more adept in everyday life and in combat, with their high mental creativity allowing them to give birth to various seals for the Fuinjutsu they became so famous and feared for. "Nizan!" a voice shouted. Itachi was startled from his reading when his little brother Sasuke came running into the library. "Come on, you got to see the rest of this place, Nizan," Sasuke said enthusiastically as he grabbed Itachi's arm and pulled him out of the room, not even waiting for his brother to respond. It happened so fast that Itachi had left his backpack, which he had brought with him to Whirlpool Nation. Neither had noticed Sadhiko's presence at all, though that was because he hiding it so well, nor did they see him approach the table that Itachi was originally sitting at. Sadhiko looked at the books that Itachi was reading and then at the young Uchiha's backpack as a thoughtful expression formed on his face. Afterwards, an hour or 2 later, Sadhiko, Kane, Anoka, Karen, Naruto, Yujin and the Konoha group heading back to the palace, where they were greeted by several loud voices and objects smashing against walls. Tashiya had informed Tsunade about her situation regarding as a Konoha shinobi, and she was not pleased to say the least. The results being her going on a rant about it, and it took strength of Tashiya to stop her and calm her down, and that he would discuss with her about it later. After that, the rest of the day went on smoothly, and the guests and Uzumaki family went down to the village to enjoy the festival set up in honor of Naruto's birthday. Naruto was very excited, as he never really got to celebrate his birthday at Konoha, so he took this chance to have much fun as he could. It also turned out that Naruto had become fast friends with Hinata and Sasuke, though with the latter it was more of a friendly rivalry, similar to the relationship between their mothers. The only tense moments were when Koharu and Hamaru were watching Naruto, since at the same time Sadhiko would be in the same place, keeping an eye on them. Sometimes he would emit a small amount of killing intent towards the 2 Konoha elders, making it a clear sign he would kill them if they made the wrong move on his family. During the festival, Naruto got to meet Jinsaku Nishimura, the first clan heir of one of the other Uzushio clans the young Uzumaki has met. The kid seemed to be even more energetic than Naruto, which was saying something, but he got along pretty well with Naruto, so that was good. Later on in the evening, the Uzumaki family and Konoha's guests returned to the palace to have birthday cake and other goodies, a prime example being ramen. Kushina herself made the birthday cake, which was a very large double-decker cake, about the same size as Naruto, was round with white icing and blue icing around the area that the 2 cakes connected, and at the top of the second cake. On both sides of the cake were red whirlpools, while at the top, written in red icing, were the words "Happy Birthday Naruto." When Naruto saw it, he nearly dived into it in joy, happy to finally have a birthday cake for him, and a yummy-looking one to boot. Fortunately, his mother managed to restrain him so he wouldn't make a mess. After an hour of eating, with the children minus Itachi and Hinata fighting over spares of the cake, while the adults talked about stuff, came the moment that Naruto had been truly waiting for: presents. Already in the main living room were piles of presents, the majority of them from other members of the Uzumaki clan, while the rest were from the other clans, people of Uzushio and Whirlpool country, and a small few from the visitors from Konoha. There was also a separate but equally large pile of presents that Tashu assumed were either from Amaya or Kushina or maybe both. Everyone was present minus the two Konoha elders, not that anyone really took notice or were concerned as the ANBU assigned to them reported that they still had the elders in sight. But the first present Naruto wanted to see first was from Sadhiko Hijiji. The little boy cried as said man walked into the room carrying a scroll the size of a person. Behind him was Yujin, who had just arrived after locking down the Tenzin. Okay Naruto, since I know how anxious you are, I'll skip the whole boring monologue, and we can get straight to the gift, Sadhiko said as he planted the scroll on the floor before rolling it open. The scroll revealed a round ceiling matrix in the center of the paper with several other matrices around the circle, sort of converging on it. On both sides of the large circle were two smaller circles that looked like whirlpools and were facing Sadhiko. Okay Naruto, first I want you to step inside the large circle for me and stay perfectly still, the elder Uzumaki said. Naruto nodded and did as instructed, though staying still was hard for him since he was a very energetic now 4-year-old. But once they had managed to calm him down, Sadhiko performed a quick set of hand seals before slamming his hands onto the two smaller circles, causing a small poof of smoke to cover Naruto's body. Everyone watched as after a minute the smoke began to clear, revealing the little blonde-haired boy, except the difference was that he wasn't blonde anymore but now red, his yellow spiky hair replaced with a dark red spiky hair. Well Naruto, what do you think? You always were asking to have red like the rest of the clan, Sadhiko said as Anoka, who had been standing beside the elder Uzumaki, placed a mirror in front of Naruto so the boy could see his new look. When he saw his hair color, Naruto cheered in joy and hugged his great-grandfather, who had a small but happy smile, glad to see Naruto happy. He wasn't the only one, as Kushina watched the scene with a smile on her face too, joy filling her heart, as she truly felt the void in her heart that she suffered for 3 years being filled from listening to her son's sounds of happiness.